Hello, beautiful people. You've just landed on Fanfic Adventure. Today's featured story is what if Harry was adopted by Tony Stark at age 5 and built a magic-infused Iron Man suit to rule the Avengers. If you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit subscribe and the notification bell. And if you're returning, you know the drill, like and share. Enough talk, let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The boy who built Tony Stark stared at the holographic display hovering in front of him, brow furrowed. The readings made no sense. For the third time in a week, Jarvis had detected unusual energy spikes in a suburban area outside London called Little Whinging. The signature wasn't radiation, wasn't cosmic, wasn't anything in his considerable database of known energy patterns. Jarvis, run another analysis on these Surrey anomalies. Compare against the most recent SHIELD database we acquired. Already completed, sir, the AI replied. No matches found. However, the energy pattern shows remarkable consistency with the Greenwich incident from 1981. Tony spun his chair, fingers dancing through projected data. Pull that file. The Greenwich incident appeared on screen, a night when instruments across Europe had gone haywire, recording massive energy surges before all data mysteriously disappeared from government servers. Tony had only recovered fragments through back channels. The pattern is almost identical, sir, though significantly smaller in scale. Tony downed his scotch. Well, that settles it. Book the jet. We're going to England. Might I remind you of the board meeting tomorrow, reschedule it. Tell Pepper. He paused. Tell her I'm investigating a potential clean energy breakthrough. Very good, sir. Shall I inform Colonel Rhodes? No, Tony replied, already reaching for his jacket. Let's keep this one close to the vest. Number 4, Privet Drive looked utterly unremarkable. Tony, dressed in an inconspicuous black hoodie and sunglasses, sat in a rented car across the street, monitoring readings on a modified tablet. 3 days of surveillance had yielded nothing until this morning when the energy readings had spiked dramatically. His attention fixed on a small, scrawny boy with messy black hair being marched into the back garden by a horse-faced woman. Even from this distance, Tony could see the boy was too thin, his clothes absurdly oversized. Jarvis, who lives at this address? Property records indicate Vernon and Petunia Dursley, their son Dudley, and their nephew, Harry Potter, age 5. Mr. Potter's parents died in a car crash when he was 1. Tony frowned, watching the woman roughly shove gardening tools into the boy's hands. Run a background check on the Dursleys. As Jarvis compiled information, Tony's tablet suddenly blared an alert. The energy readings had spiked again, and they were coming directly from the small boy. Tony watched, fascinated, as the child struggled with hedge clippers nearly half his size. The boy's frustration was evident, his small face screwed up in concentration. Suddenly, impossibly, the hedge seemed to trim itself, branches falling away in perfect lines while the clippers hovered slightly above the boy's hands. What the hell? Tony whispered, checking his readings. The energy signature was off the charts. A shriek pierced the air as the woman spotted what was happening. She rushed over, yanking the boy by his arm so roughly that Tony instinctively stepped out of the car. He watched as she dragged the child inside, her furious scolding audible even from the street. Jarvis, deep background on Harry Potter. Parents, extended family, medical records, everything. Sir, I'm finding unusual gaps in the records. James and Lily Potter have almost no digital footprint. Their death certificates exist but no accident report corresponding to the alleged car crash. Harry Potter has no medical records after age 1. Tony's instincts, honed by years of uncovering conspiracies and corporate espionage, were screaming. Keep digging. I'm going in. Vernon Dursley's face purpled as he opened the door to find Tony Stark on his doorstep. Whatever you're selling, we don't want any, he barked, moving to slam the door. Tony caught it with his foot. Not selling anything, Mr. Dursley. Tony Stark. Perhaps you've heard of me. He flashed his most disarming smile. Vernon's eyes narrowed, then widened in recognition. The American billionaire. What could you possibly want here? I understand you have a nephew living with you. I'm here about a special opportunity for gifted children. Vernon's face underwent a fascinating transformation, shock, suspicion, then something like greedy calculation. Our Dudley is quite gifted, yes. Top of his class. Actually, I was referring to Harry Potter. The name acted like a switch, flipping Vernon's expression to instant anger. There's nothing special about the boy. He's a troublemaker, ungrateful. A crash from inside the house interrupted him. Vernon turned, bellowing, Petunia. What's he done now? Taking advantage of the distraction, Tony slipped past Vernon into the house. He followed the sounds of distress to the kitchen, where the thin woman from earlier was standing rigidly by the counter, staring in horror at shattered dishes that appeared to be reassembling themselves in midair. In the corner, the small boy, Harry, was pressed against the wall, eyes wide with fear, a livid red mark on his cheek. Tony's gaze fixed on the slap mark, then moved to the dishes hovering in the air, then back to the terrified child. The situation crystallized in an instant. Mr. Potter, Tony said calmly, crouching down to the boy's level. My name is Tony. That's quite a trick with the dishes. Harry's green eyes, startlingly bright behind broken taped-together glasses, darted between Tony and his aunt. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to. She pushed me into them and he broke off, clearly expecting punishment. No need to apologize for being extraordinary, Tony replied, then turned to the adults. I think we should have a conversation about Harry's future. 3 hours later, Tony sat in his hotel suite, staring at the ceiling. His conversation with the Dursleys had been illuminating in the worst possible ways. They had practically jumped at his carefully implied offer to take the boy off their hands, their thinly veiled contempt for their nephew sickening. The boy himself had remained silent, watching Tony with a wary hope that broke something in Tony's chest. Jarvis, what have we got? Sir, I've uncovered some concerning patterns. Child Welfare Services have received 3 anonymous reports regarding Harry Potter over the years, but all investigations were mysteriously closed without follow-up. School records indicate frequent unexplained absences, and teachers' notes mention concerns about his home situation. Tony's jaw tightened. And the energy readings? Continuing to spike around the boy, particularly during moments of emotional distress. I've compiled a list of similar anomalies globally. Most center around children, though some adults register similar patterns. Interestingly, many of these signatures seem to cluster in certain family lines. Tony drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair. So we're potentially looking at a genetic component to whatever this is. Some kind of mutation? Unknown, sir. However, I have identified an individual approaching the hotel who registers a similar energy signature. Quite powerful. He appears to be heading directly to your suite. Tony barely had time to stand before a sharp knock sounded at his door. On the security feed, an elderly man with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles stood waiting, dressed in what could only be described as flamboyant purple robes. Well, that's not suspicious at all, Tony muttered. Jarvis, suit on standby. Tony opened the door to find the strange visitor smiling pleasantly. Good evening, Mr. Stark, the man said in a cultured British accent. I believe we have a mutual interest to discuss. My name is Albus Dumbledore, and I'm here about young Harry Potter. Let me get this straight, Tony said, pacing the length of his suite while Dumbledore calmly sipped tea. Magic is real. Harry's a wizard. His parents were murdered by some magical Hitler who then tried to kill Harry but somehow couldn't. And now you've got the kid stashed with those abusive relatives because of some blood protection mumbo-jumbo. A rather succinct if somewhat colorful summary, Dumbledore replied. The blood wards protecting Harry at his aunt's home are the strongest magical protection we can provide against Lord Voldemort's followers. Yeah, great job protecting him from the people inside the house, Tony snapped. The kid has a handprint on his face, wears clothes 4 sizes too big, and flinches when adults move too quickly. Those are classic signs of abuse, Gandalf. Something flickered in Dumbledore's blue eyes. I assure you, Mr. Stark, Harry's well-being is my primary concern. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you've left a traumatized orphan with people who resent his existence. And don't tell me you didn't know. Men like you always know. Dumbledore set down his teacup. The magical world is complex, Mr. Stark, with threats you cannot comprehend. Harry Potter is extraordinarily important, to your world, sure. But what about to himself? Tony stopped pacing. I'm adopting him. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. I'm afraid that's quite impossible. Nothing's impossible for Tony Stark. He leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. I'm taking Harry. I'll hire the best lawyers in both worlds if I have to. And if your magical community tries to stop me, I'll go public with everything I know about your hidden society. That would violate the international statute of secrecy. Try me. The two men stared at each other, the tension palpable. Finally, Dumbledore spoke. Perhaps a compromise. Harry's magical heritage cannot be denied. At 11, he must attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry to learn to control his abilities. Fine. He can go to your magic school when he's 11. But he lives with me, and I get legal guardianship. The blood protection, I'll build him better protection. Technology that your magical terrorists won't understand or be able to counter. Dumbledore studied Tony for a long moment. You are quite serious about this. Deadly. Very well. I propose this, Harry lives with you, but Petunia Dursley signs guardianship papers to maintain the blood connection legally. He returns to Privet Drive for 2 weeks each summer to renew the blood wards, with you present if you wish. When he turns 11, he attends Hogwarts during the school year, holidays with you. Tony considered this. 1 week each summer, with me present the entire time. And I want magical documents giving me authority in your world too. That can be arranged. Dumbledore rose. I must say, Mr. Stark, I did not expect this development when I sensed a Muggle investigating young Harry. Muggle? Non-magical person. Yeah, well, I've never been just anything. Tony extended his hand. I assume you can draw up whatever magical contracts we need? Indeed. Though I must warn you, Mr. Stark, raising a magical child will present challenges beyond anything you've experienced. Tony smiled thinly. I build advanced weaponry and fly in a metal suit. I think I can handle a kid with some special talents. Harry Potter stood in the middle of Tony Stark's private jet, eyes wide as he took in the luxury surrounding him. 3 days had passed in a whirlwind of adults arguing, papers being signed, and hushed conversations he couldn't quite hear. Now he was leaving England with a man he barely knew, clutching a small backpack containing his few possessions. You can sit anywhere you like, kid, Tony said, watching the boy's hesitation with a mixture of concern and amusement. The whole plane's ours. Harry carefully selected a seat by the window, perching on the edge as if afraid to fully commit to the cushions. Are you really taking me to America, Mr. Stark? Tony, he corrected. And yes, to New York. I think you'll like the tower. Great views, lots of cool tech to play with. But... Harry bit his lip. Why me? Uncle Vernon says I'm a burden. A freak. Something dangerous flashed in Tony's eyes, but his voice remained gentle. First rule, Harry. Vernon Dursley is an idiot, and nothing he says matters anymore. Second rule, what happened back there, with the dishes and the hedge? That's not freakish. It's extraordinary. It's magic, Harry said, testing the word that had been forbidden in the Dursley household. Mr. Dumbledore told me. Apparently so. Tony settled into the seat across from Harry. I'm still wrapping my head around that. But between you and me, I've seen weirder things. You're not afraid of me? Harry asked in a small voice. Afraid? Kid, I'm intrigued. I built my first circuit board at 4. You're doing interdimensional energy manipulation at 5. We're going to get along just fine. As the plane took off, Harry pressed his face against the window, watching England recede below them. For the first time in his memory, he felt something unfamiliar unfurling in his chest, hope. Stark Tower loomed above Manhattan, its distinctive architecture gleaming in the morning sun. Inside the penthouse, Tony stood surrounded by holograms, reviewing security upgrades while Pepper Potts paced behind him, her heels clicking rhythmically against the floor. Tony, you can't just adopt a child on impulse, she exclaimed for perhaps the 5th time that morning. There are procedures, home studies, legal considerations, all handled, Tony replied, flicking through blueprints for Harry's suite. The legal paperwork is ironclad in both, jurisdictions. Both what? Pepper stopped pacing. What aren't you telling me? Tony hesitated. He'd sworn a magical oath to Dumbledore not to reveal the wizarding world's existence to anyone without permission. Let's just say Harry's a special case with some unique circumstances. Special how? Before Tony could answer, the elevator doors slid open to reveal Happy Hogan leading a wide-eyed Harry into the penthouse. Package delivered, boss, Happy announced. Kid hardly said 2 words the whole ride from the airport. Pepper's irritation instantly melted at the sight of the small boy clutching his backpack. She approached him with a warm smile. Hello, Harry. I'm Pepper Potts. It's lovely to meet you. Harry shuffled his feet. Hello, Miss Potts, he replied in his small British accent. Your building is very tall. It is, isn't it? And please, call me Pepper. She shot Tony a look that clearly said, this conversation isn't over, before turning back to Harry. Are you hungry after your long journey? Harry glanced uncertainly at Tony, as if seeking permission to answer. Go ahead, kid. From now on, you eat when you're hungry, Tony said, recognizing the behavior of someone accustomed to having basic needs denied. Yes, please, Harry said. If it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all, Pepper assured him. Jarvis, could you order some lunch for us? Certainly, Miss Potts, the AI responded. Harry jumped, eyes darting around the ceiling. Who's that? Tony grinned. Jarvis, introduce yourself to our newest resident. Good afternoon, Master Potter. I am Jarvis, an artificial intelligence created by Mr. Stark. I run the household systems and am available to assist you with anything you might need. Harry's jaw dropped. He's a robot in the walls. More or less, Tony replied. Think of him as a really smart butler who can be everywhere at once. Like magic? Harry asked innocently. Tony hesitated. Like very advanced technology. Which, honestly, is pretty close to magic anyway. Pepper's eyebrows rose at the exchange, but she didn't comment. Harry, would you like to see your room while we wait for lunch? Harry nodded, and Tony led them down a hallway to a door that slid open automatically. Inside was a spacious bedroom with a spectacular view of the city, furnished with a child-sized bed, desk, and shelves already stocked with books and toys. This is, for me. Harry whispered, eyes huge behind his glasses. All yours, Tony confirmed. We can redecorate if you want something different. Harry wandered into the room, touching everything gingerly as if afraid it might disappear. I've never had my own room before. Just the cupboard. Cupboard? Pepper questioned. Under the stairs, Harry replied matter-of-factly. That's where I slept at Uncle Vernon's. Pepper's sharp intake of breath matched the tightening of Tony's jaw. She shot him a look that somehow conveyed both horrified understanding and an apology for questioning his decision. "Well," Tony said, keeping his voice light despite the rage simmering underneath, "no more cupboards. This is home now, Harry. And there's a lot more to see." The first incident happened 3 weeks after Harry's arrival. Tony was in his workshop, tinkering with a new repulsor design while Harry sat at a small workbench Tony had set up for him, carefully assembling a simple robot kit. "Mr. Stark, Tony," Harry corrected himself, still struggling with the informality, "I can't reach this part." Tony glanced over to see Harry stretching for a screwdriver that had somehow migrated to the far side of a cluttered workbench. "I got it, kid," Tony said, turning back to his work. But before he could move, the screwdriver slid across the surface, seemingly on its own, until it gently bumped against Harry's hand. Tony froze, staring at the impossibility he'd just witnessed. Harry, realizing what had happened, dropped the tool with a clatter. "I'm sorry," he exclaimed, shrinking in his seat. "I didn't mean to, I forgot." Hey, Tony said quickly, crossing to Harry's side. "No apologizing, remember? That was..." He searched for the right word. "Actually, that was pretty convenient. How often can you do that?" Harry blinked, clearly surprised by the reaction. "Sometimes. When I really want something to happen. But Aunt Petunia said it's freakish. Rule number 3, we don't use that word in this house." Tony pulled up a stool. "Look, Harry. What you can do is incredible. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to understand and develop. Like your inventions. Exactly like my inventions." Tony tapped his fingers on the workbench, mind racing. "In fact, I think it's time we start a new project. Let's figure out how your abilities work." Harry's expression brightened. "Like scientists?" "Exactly like scientists. The best discoveries happen when we explore the unknown." Tony grabbed a tablet. "Jarvis, create a new project file, Merlin Protocol." "File created, sir." "First experiment," Tony continued, eyes alight with enthusiasm. "Let's see what else you can move." In the months that followed, Tony developed a systematic approach to understanding Harry's abilities. They documented each instance of accidental magic, attempting to recreate the conditions and results. Tony installed sensors throughout the tower, recording energy fluctuations whenever Harry performed magic. On a December evening 6 months after Harry's arrival, they sat in Tony's lab reviewing the latest data. Snow fell softly outside the windows as Harry, now 6, carefully wrote observations in a notebook Tony had given him. "Your energy signature changes depending on the type of magic," Tony noted, pointing to a graph. "Movement-based magic has a different pattern than transformative magic." "Like when I turned your coffee blue?" Harry asked with a mischievous smile. "Exactly like that. Nearly gave Pepper a heart attack." Tony ruffled the boy's perpetually messy hair. "You're getting better at controlling it." "Sometimes it still happens when I'm scared or angry, though," Harry admitted. "That's normal. Even I lose control of my tech sometimes when emotions run high." The lab door slid open, and Pepper entered carrying a tray of hot chocolate. "I thought our scientists might need a break," she said, setting the tray down. "It's nearly bedtime, Harry. Just 5 more minutes." Harry pleaded, giving Pepper the wide-eyed look that he'd discovered was surprisingly effective. "Manipulative little wizard," Tony muttered fondly. "Fine, 5 more minutes. Then teeth brushing, story, bed." Pepper smiled, watching the interaction. Over the months, she had witnessed a transformation in Tony, more responsible, more patient, often cutting meetings short to be home for dinner with Harry. And Harry had blossomed from the frightened, malnourished child who'd arrived into a curious, increasingly confident boy who followed Tony everywhere like an adoring shadow. "Boss," Jarvis interrupted, Director Fury is in the lobby requesting immediate access. Tony groaned. Tell him I'm busy with family time. He insists it's urgent. He mentioned being aware of unusual energy signatures in the tower. Tony and Pepper exchanged alarmed glances. Harry, Tony said carefully, why don't you go with Pepper for that bedtime story? I need to talk to someone about boring grown-up stuff. Harry looked between them, perceptive enough to sense the tension. Is it about my magic? Is someone going to take me away? No, Tony said firmly. No one is taking you anywhere, ever. I promise. This is just a conversation I need to have. After Pepper had led a reluctant Harry from the lab, Tony straightened his shoulders. Send him up, Jarvis. And activate Protocol Guardian, passive scan mode. Minutes later, Nick Fury strode into the lab, his black coat swirling around him, his single eye fixed intently on Tony. Stark, he greeted tersely. Want to explain why shield sensors have been picking up unknown energy signatures from this tower for the past 6 months? The same type of energy we've been monitoring globally for decades. Hello to you too, Nick. Scotch. Tony offered, stalling. Cut the crap. We know about the boy. Tony's casual demeanor vanished. Then you know he's off limits. A child with abilities living with Tony Stark. That's a security concern. Harry is my legally adopted son, not a security concern. Tony's voice hardened. And if you think about taking him to one of your shield facilities for observation, remember who designed half your security systems. Fury studied Tony for a moment. I'm not here to take the kid, Stark. I'm here to make sure you understand what you've gotten yourself into. There are others like him out there, a whole hidden society. Most fly under our radar, but sometimes they cause incidents that can't be explained away. I'm aware of the wizarding world, if that's what you're dancing around, Tony replied. Dumbledore filled me in on the basics. Fury's eyebrow rose. Albus Dumbledore came to you personally. Then you know Potter isn't just any wizard child. The boy who lived, survivor of the killing curse, potential target of magical terrorists. Yes, I've got the memo. And you still took him in. Fury shook his head. Either braver or more foolish than I gave you credit for. He's a kid who needed a home, Fury. End of story. No, Stark. Beginning of story. Fury moved to the window, looking out over the city. S.H.I.E.L.D. has a non-interference policy with the magical community. They handle their problems, we handle ours. But Potter bridges both worlds now. If he stays with you, that makes him our concern too. Your point. My point is that you've painted a target on yourself. Harry Potter is significant to their world. People will come looking for him eventually, people with abilities you can't fight with your fancy suit. Try me, Tony challenged, echoing his words to Dumbledore months earlier. I'm not your enemy here, Stark. I'm offering resources. S.H.I.E.L.D. has files on magical capabilities, weaknesses, historical events. Information you might need to protect the boy. Tony's eyes narrowed. And in return, keep us informed about his development. Any significant magical breakthroughs. And if the day comes when we need an intermediary with the magical world. You want to weaponize him. I want to be prepared, Fury corrected. You of all people should understand that. Tony was silent for a long moment. I'll consider your offer. But let me be crystal clear, Harry's welfare comes first. Always. He's not a weapon, not an asset, not leverage. He's my kid. Fury nodded once. Files will be delivered tomorrow. Encrypted, your eyes only. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Stark, from what our surveillance shows, you're not doing a bad job with him. After Fury left, Tony remained in the lab, lost in thought until a small voice broke the silence. Is he gone? Tony turned to find Harry in the doorway, clutching a worn stuffed lion that Pepper had given him. "You should be in bed, Squirt," Tony said, forcing lightness into his voice. "Did you eavesdrop on my very private, very adult conversation?" Harry nodded, unrepentant. "Jarvis helped me listen." "Traitor," Tony muttered toward the ceiling. "I believed young Master Potter had a right to information concerning himself, sir," Jarvis replied primly. Harry approached Tony slowly. "The man with the eye patch, he knows about magic." "Apparently so. There's a lot more people in the know than I realized. He said people will come looking for me." Harry's voice trembled slightly. "Bad people." Tony knelt to Harry's level. "Listen to me. Yes, there might be bad people out there. But they'd have to get through me, through this tower's security, through Jarvis, through Pepper, who is scarier than all of us combined when she's angry, and now apparently through Super Spy Fury and his agents too. But what if they use magic?" "You don't have magic." "No," Tony agreed, "but I have science. And if there's one thing I've learned from our experiments, it's that your magic follows certain rules. Rules can be studied, understood, countered." He tapped the arc reactor glowing beneath his shirt. "They'll have magic, but we'll have something better." "What's that?" "Magic and science together." Tony stood, lifting Harry into his arms. "Now, bed for real this time. We've got work to do tomorrow." The years passed in a blur of experiments, inventions, and increasingly impressive displays of Harry's magical ability. Each summer included the required week at Privet Drive, a week that Tony transformed from an ordeal into something the Dursleys dreaded far more than Harry did. Tony would arrive with security, personal chefs, and a complete renovation team that transformed Petunia's pristine home into a technological showcase that left the neighbors gawking and the Dursleys fuming. By the time Harry turned 10, he had grown into a confident, brilliantly creative boy who seamlessly blended his magical talents with the technological expertise he'd absorbed from Tony. He attended a private school in Manhattan where his British accent and quick mind made him popular, though he was careful to never reveal his magical abilities to his friends. In the evenings and weekends, Tony and Harry worked side by side in the lab, developing technologies that could interact with magical energy. They had created sensors that could detect magical signatures, shields that could absorb certain spells, and even basic devices that could store and redirect magical energy. One Saturday morning, Harry burst into Tony's bedroom, practically vibrating with excitement, a contraption clutched in his hands. "Dad! It worked! The prototype worked!" Tony, barely awake, squinted at his enthusiastic son. The term "Dad" still gave him a warm feeling in his chest, even after Harry had started using it 2 years ago. "What time is it?" he groaned. 7:30, but look. Harry thrust the device forward, a gauntlet resembling a miniature version of Tony's Iron Man technology, but with intricate runes etched into the metal. Tony sat up, instantly alert. "You got the containment field working?" "Better than working." Harry pulled on the gauntlet and pointed it at a pillow. His face scrunched in concentration, and the familiar energy signature that preceded his magic flared, but instead of flowing from his hand directly, it channeled through the gauntlet, which glowed briefly before the pillow levitated smoothly into the air. "Holy shit," Tony breathed, then quickly corrected himself. "I mean, holy cow. That's incredible, Harry. The runes help focus the energy." Harry explained excitedly. "I used the books Professor Dumbledore sent for my birthday. The containment field captures a portion of my magical output, and the channeling matrix redirects it with almost 40% greater efficiency." Tony watched in amazement as Harry effortlessly moved the pillow in complex patterns, far more controlled than his usual wandless magic. "This is it," Tony said, mind racing with implications. "This is the breakthrough we've been working toward. A true interface between technology and magic." Harry beamed with pride. "I call it the Arcane Amplifier. Version 1.0. Catchy." Tony climbed out of bed, reaching for his robe. Let's get to the lab. I want full diagnostics, and then we need to think about applications. I already have ideas, Harry said, following Tony down the hallway. If we scale it up, incorporate the repulsor technology from your suits. We could create a magic-powered Iron Man variant, Tony finished, grinning. I like how you think, kid. In the lab, they spent hours testing the gauntlet's capabilities, documenting its effects on different types of magic, and planning improvements. By evening, they had filled multiple holographic displays with designs and calculations. The power requirements are still tricky, Tony mused, studying an energy flow diagram. Your magical output is impressive but inconsistent. Maybe we could add a storage component. Harry suggested. Something that builds up a charge from ambient magical energy that I can tap into when needed? Possible, but where would we find ambient magical energy in quantity? New York isn't exactly Hogwarts, according to your books. Harry frowned thoughtfully. What about creating it? The runes in this book suggest methods for generating magical fields. As they debated possibilities, Jarvis interrupted. Sir, an owl is attempting to enter through the balcony door. An owl? Tony repeated. In Manhattan? At night? Harry's eyes widened. My Hogwarts letter. Professor Dumbledore said it would come by owl when I turned 11. You're still 10, last time I checked. Only for another month. Harry was already racing to the balcony doors, sliding them open to admit a dignified tawny owl carrying a thick envelope. The bird swooped in, dropped the letter on a workbench, and perched expectantly on a nearby chair. Harry approached the envelope reverently, tracing the emerald green address, Mr. H. Potter, the East Laboratory, Stark Tower, Manhattan, New York. They know which room I'm in, Harry whispered, impressed. That's creepy but cool. Tony watched as Harry broke the wax seal and unfolded the parchment, reading aloud the acceptance letter to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, followed by a list of required supplies that included robes, spellbooks, and a wand. Congratulations, kid, Tony said, feeling a complicated mix of pride and apprehension. Looks like you're officially a wizard now. Harry looked up from the letter, his expression similarly conflicted. I'll be gone for months at a time. In Scotland. Hey, I've got private jets, remember? And we've been working on magical-resistant communication devices. You won't get rid of me that easily. But what about our projects? The arcane amplifier. All our work. Tony squeezed Harry's shoulder. The work continues. You'll learn proper magic at Hogwarts, theory, spells, all the wizard-wide details we've been cobbling together from books. That knowledge is going to supercharge our research. You're not disappointed? Harry asked hesitantly. That I'm going. Disappointed? Harry, I've known this was coming since the day I brought you home. Your magic is part of who you are. Tony smiled. Though I expect detailed reports on all magical theory for our research database. Harry laughed, relief evident in his face. I'll take the best notes in the class. That's my boy. Now, there's a rather judgmental owl staring at us. What does it want? Oh. It's waiting for a reply. Harry quickly grabbed a notepad. I should confirm I'm attending. As Harry scribbled his acceptance, Tony picked up the supply list, eyeing it critically. Pewter cauldrons. Quills. These people are stuck in the Middle Ages. Professor Dumbledore says the magical world is quite traditional. Traditional is one word for it. Outdated is another. Tony frowned at a particular line. First years not allowed their own broomsticks. What is this, magical elementary school? Flying broomsticks, Dad, Harry reminded him, grinning. Right. Still processing that one. Tony tapped the parchment. Well, looks like we need to plan a shopping trip to Wizardland. Harry tied his response to the owl's leg and watched it fly off into the night. He turned to Tony, eyes bright with excitement and anticipation. Everything's going to change now, isn't it? Tony nodded. But change is what Starks do best. He corrected himself with a smile. What Potter Starks do best. Harry picked up the arcane amplifier gauntlet, examining it thoughtfully. I want to finish this before I go. Something to take with me. A reminder that I'm not just a wizard or just a scientist's son. I'm both. That's right, Tony said, chest swelling with pride. And that makes you something unique in both worlds. Something extraordinary. As they returned to their work, Harry fitting the gauntlet back onto his hand, neither father or son fully realized just how extraordinary their fusion of magic and technology would one day become, or how it would forever change both the worlds Harry straddled. Chapter 2, Two Worlds. Platform 9 3/4 bustled with activity as Harry Potter stood beside his trunk, watching wizard families bid tearful goodbyes while owls hooted indignantly in their cages. The Scarlet Hogwarts Express belched steam into the autumn air, its whistle piercing through the din of conversation. You're sure you packed the modified tablet? Tony asked for the third time, adjusting Harry's blue and gray scarf. The one with the magical shielding? Harry patted his backpack. Yes, Dad. And the solar charger, the prototype communication device, and enough sensor equipment to start a small lab. Good. Though I still don't understand why we can't just upgrade their electricity situation. Tony frowned, looking around at the decidedly non-technological surroundings. A simple arc reactor could power that entire castle for centuries. Professor McGonagall explained in her letter, high concentrations of magic interfere with electrical systems. Harry grinned. That's why our magical tech interfaces are so revolutionary. Still, medieval living conditions. Tony muttered, then straightened Harry's collar. Remember the emergency protocols? If anything threatens me, I activate the beacon. You'll have the jet ready to reach Scottish airspace within 90 minutes, Harry recited. And I keep the emergency port key Professor Dumbledore provided with me at all times. Tony nodded, seemingly satisfied, though Harry could read the worry lines around his eyes. And you'll contact me, every evening through our modified communications array, Harry finished. Dad, I'll be fine. Hogwarts is supposed to be the safest place in the wizarding world. Yeah, well, I've heard that line before about other places. Tony's expression softened. I'm going to miss you, kid. I'll miss you too. Harry hugged Tony tightly, no longer the small, frightened child who'd arrived at Stark Tower 6 years ago, but still feeling a flutter of anxiety at their first long separation. A final whistle blew, and students began rushing toward the train. That's your cue, Tony said, helping Harry with his trunk. Go show those wizards what a Potter Stark can do. Harry grinned, hefting his backpack. I'll make you proud. You already do. Every day. As Harry climbed aboard, finding an empty compartment and leaning out the window to wave goodbye, he felt the strangest sense of straddling two completely different worlds. Behind him, magical students in robes discussing spells and potions. Before him, Tony Stark in his designer suit and tinted glasses, looking utterly out of place yet somehow completely unfazed by the magical chaos surrounding him. The train lurched forward, and Harry watched Tony grow smaller in the distance, waving until the platform disappeared around a bend. Only then did he settle into his seat, hands automatically reaching for his specially modified tablet to document his observations of magical energy readings on the train. The compartment door slid open, revealing a girl with bushy brown hair already wearing her Hogwarts robes. Excuse me, she said in a crisp, authoritative voice, have you seen a toad? A boy named Neville has lost one. Harry looked up from his tablet. Sorry, no toads here. The girl's attention immediately fixed on the device in his hands. Is that a computer? But electronics don't work around magic. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history. Harry smiled. It's modified. Special shielding to protect against magical interference. That's impossible, she said, then immediately sat down across from him, curiosity overtaking her certainty. Isn't it? Nothing's impossible. Just undiscovered. Harry extended his hand. I'm Harry. Harry Potter. Her eyes widened, gaze flickering briefly to his forehead where the lightning scar was just visible beneath his unruly hair. Hermione Granger, she replied, shaking his hand. I've read all about you, of course. You're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts. Am I? Harry asked, amused. I should probably read those. Though I suspect they're missing some key updates. What do you mean? Well, for starters, I haven't lived with my Muggle relatives since I was 5. I was adopted by Tony Stark. Hermione's jaw dropped. Tony Stark. The American billionaire. The weapons manufacturer. Former weapons manufacturer, Harry corrected automatically. He's more into clean energy and advanced technology these days. And Iron Man stuff. But, how? Why? Hermione's expression shifted rapidly between shock, curiosity, and analytical consideration. The magical world is supposed to be kept secret from Muggles. Harry explained the abbreviated version of his adoption story as the train rumbled through the English countryside. Hermione proved to be an excellent audience, asking insightful questions and making connections faster than Harry could explain them. So you've been experimenting with combining magic and technology, she asked, eyes alight with intellectual excitement. That's extraordinary. Has anyone in the magical world done this before? Not that we could find in any of the books Professor Dumbledore sent me. The wizarding world seems to have developed completely separately from technological advancement. Hermione nodded thoughtfully. Most magical families live quite traditionally. It's as if they stopped adopting Muggle innovations around the Victorian era. Which creates a fascinating opportunity, Harry said, warming to his favorite topic. Think about it, what could be possible if we combined modern science with magical principles? Dad and I have already developed prototypes that can channel and focus magical energy through technological interfaces. Can you show me? Harry hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metallic device resembling a wristwatch. This is the latest version of what we call the arcane interface. It's like a focusing tool for wandless magic. Hermione leaned forward, examining the device with obvious fascination. But we're supposed to use wands at Hogwarts. And I will, Harry assured her, slipping the device back into his pocket. This is just for research. I want to understand the theoretical principles behind magic, not just how to perform spells. A gleam of intellectual kinship flashed in Hermione's eyes. I feel exactly the same way. There must be fundamental laws governing magical effects, like physics governs the natural world. Most spell books just tell you the incantation and wand movement without explaining why they work. Exactly. Harry exclaimed, feeling an immediate connection with this sharp-minded girl. Dad says it's like being given a nuclear reactor without understanding atomic theory. As the train journey continued, their conversation flowed effortlessly from magical theory to scientific principles to their expectations of Hogwarts. By the time they changed into their school robes, Harry felt he'd found a kindred spirit, someone who could understand both worlds he inhabited. The Great Hall of Hogwarts exceeded even Harry's expectations. Thousands of candles floated beneath a ceiling enchanted to reflect the night sky, illuminating 4 long tables where students sat beneath their house banners. At the high table, Albus Dumbledore watched benevolently as Professor McGonagall led the first years toward the front, where a tattered hat sat on a stool. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, McGonagall announced, unrolling a long parchment. Harry half listened to the names being called, his attention split between the sorting ceremony and the readings on the discreet sensor he'd clipped to his robe. The magical energy in the hall was unlike anything he'd measured before, dense, layered, and ancient. Granger, Hermione. Harry watched as Hermione approached the stool, looking nervous but determined. The hat settled over her bushy hair, and after a moment's deliberation, it shouted, "Ravenclaw." The table under the blue and bronze banner erupted in applause as Hermione made her way there, looking pleased. More names were called, students sorted into their houses. A blonde boy named Malfoy was immediately declared a Slytherin. A red-headed boy called Weasley joined Gryffindor, where his brothers welcomed him enthusiastically. "Potter, Harry." The hall fell silent as Harry stepped forward. Whispers erupted immediately, students craning their necks for a better view of the boy who lived. Harry kept his expression neutral as he sat on the stool, the hat dropping over his eyes. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. A brilliant mind, too. There's talent, oh yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you?" Harry thought of Hermione and Ravenclaw, the only student he'd connected with so far. He thought of his dual identity, wizard and scientist, and his drive to understand the principles behind magic. "Knowledge seeker, are you?" the hat whispered. "With a mind shaped by both worlds." "Yes, I believe it must be Ravenclaw." The hat shouted the last word to the hall, and Harry removed it to find the Ravenclaw table cheering wildly. He made his way there, sliding into a seat beside Hermione, who beamed at him. "I knew you'd be in Ravenclaw too," she whispered as McGonagall continued the sorting. "With all your questions about magical theory." Harry smiled, feeling a sense of belonging that surprised him. For years, he'd straddled two worlds without fully fitting into either. Perhaps here, among others who valued knowledge and understanding, he might find a balance. As Dumbledore rose to give his welcoming speech, Harry discreetly checked his communication device. A message from Tony had already arrived. "Congrats on Ravenclaw, kid. Jarvis predicted it. Remember, smart doesn't mean you can't also be brave, cunning, and loyal. Send censor readings tonight. Miss you already." Harry tucked the device away, smiling as food magically appeared on the golden plates before them. He was miles from New York, surrounded by magic instead of technology, yet somehow Tony's presence remained. Two worlds, bridged by one boy. "Mr. Potter, a moment please." Harry paused on his way out of Transfiguration class, where he'd just successfully turned a match into a needle on his first attempt. Professor McGonagall regarded him over her square spectacles, expression unreadable. "Yes, Professor. The headmaster would like to see you in his office. The password is chocolate frog." Harry nodded, wondering what Dumbledore wanted only 3 weeks into the term. He gathered his books and made his way through the castle's winding corridors to the stone gargoyle guarding the headmaster's office. "Chocolate frog," he said, and the gargoyle leapt aside, revealing a spiral staircase that moved upward like an escalator. Harry stepped onto it, his hand instinctively checking that his arcane interface was secure in his pocket. Dumbledore's office was a circular room filled with fascinating silver instruments that emitted occasional puffs of smoke. Portraits of past headmasters adorned the walls, many pretending to sleep but watching through slitted eyes. Behind an enormous claw-footed desk sat Albus Dumbledore himself, looking exactly as he had during his visits to Stark Tower, silver-bearded, blue-eyed, and radiating an aura of calm wisdom. "Ah, Harry. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down." Harry took the offered chair, noting the presence of another man in the room, tall, black, with a shaved head and imposing presence. "Hello, Professor. You wanted to see me?" "Indeed. Allow me to introduce Kingsley Shacklebolt from the Ministry of Magic. He is an Auror, what you might consider the magical equivalent of law enforcement." Kingsley nodded politely. "Mr. Potter." Harry inclined his head, instantly alert. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong, precisely," Dumbledore replied, steepling his fingers. "However, a matter has arisen that concerns both you and your adoptive father. The Ministry has received reports of unauthorized magical technological experimentation," Kingsley said, his deep voice carrying a note of authority. Activities that potentially violate the international statute of secrecy. Harry maintained a neutral expression, though his mind raced. I'm not sure I understand. Let me be direct, Mr. Potter, Kingsley continued. We know that you and Tony Stark have been developing devices that interface with magic. Devices that could potentially expose our world to muggles. With respect, Harry replied carefully, my father already knows about the magical world. He has signed all the secrecy agreements Professor Dumbledore provided. One muggle with knowledge is manageable. But these devices... Kingsley produced a folder containing photographs of Harry's workshop at Stark Tower, complete with prototype magical interfaces. These represent a fundamental breach of the separation between worlds that has protected magical society for centuries. Harry frowned. How did you get these photos? The Ministry monitors underage magic, Mr. Potter, Dumbledore explained gently. Particularly in the case of someone with your unique status. You've been spying on us, Harry stated flatly. Observing, Kingsley corrected. And what we've observed is concerning. These experiments must cease immediately. Harry felt a flash of indignation. Our research isn't hurting anyone. If anything, it could benefit the magical world by introducing new applications. That is precisely the concern, Kingsley interrupted. The magical world has deliberately separated itself from Muggle technology for good reason. History has shown us that when Muggles discover magic, persecution follows. That was centuries ago. And it's not like we're planning to mass-produce these devices. Dumbledore raised a placating hand. Harry, no one is suggesting malicious intent. However, the statute of secrecy exists to protect both worlds. Integrating magic and technology at this scale represents uncharted territory with potential consequences none of us can predict. Harry took a deep breath, considering his response. Professor, you've known about my situation since I was 5. You approved my adoption by Tony, knowing who he is, an inventor, an innovator. Did you really expect us not to explore the intersection of our worlds? A hint of a smile crossed Dumbledore's face. I confess I anticipated some curiosity. However, the extent of your advancements has progressed more rapidly than expected. The Ministry's position, Kingsley stated firmly, is that these experiments must be regulated, if not ceased entirely. We're prepared to issue an official warning. That won't be necessary, Dumbledore interjected smoothly. I believe we can reach an accommodation that respects both the Ministry's concerns and Harry's unique circumstances. He turned to Harry. What would you say to registering your research with the Department of Magical Innovation at the Ministry? With appropriate oversight and confidentiality agreements? Harry considered this. I'd need to discuss it with my father. Of course, Dumbledore nodded. In the meantime, I suggest limiting your experimental work to theoretical exploration while at Hogwarts. Harry recognized a reasonable compromise when he heard one. I can agree to that, Professor. Excellent. And perhaps, Mr. Shacklebolt, you might arrange a meeting between appropriate Ministry officials and Mr. Stark. I suspect many concerns could be addressed through direct dialogue. Kingsley looked skeptical but nodded. I'll propose it to the Minister. After a few more minutes of discussion, Harry was dismissed. As he descended the spiral staircase, his mind churned with implications. The magical world was more actively monitoring him than he'd realized. Their fear of technological integration was palpable, and perhaps not entirely irrational, given how transformative such advances could be. He needed to talk to Tony immediately. They're afraid, Tony's voice came through clearly on the modified communication device, despite the magical interference that should have made such contact impossible. And fear makes bureaucrats do stupid things. Harry sat cross-legged on his bed in Ravenclaw Tower, curtains drawn and a silencing charm in place to ensure privacy. So what do we do? Stop our research? Hell no, Tony replied immediately. We adjust. Play their game while continuing our work more discreetly. I'll take the meeting with these ministry people, charm them with the full Stark experience. And if that doesn't work, then we remind them that knowledge doesn't stop advancing just because someone's afraid of it. There was a pause. But let's start with diplomacy. How's the magical education coming along? Harry smiled at the characteristic pivot. It's fascinating, Dad. The theory behind transfiguration has incredible implications for matter conversion. And charms, they're essentially programmed energy manipulations with verbal and somatic components as triggers. English, kid. Not all of us are taking Wizard 101. Magic follows rules, Harry simplified. Specific rules that can be documented, analyzed, and potentially replicated through technological means. I've been taking detailed notes on the theoretical principles underlying each spell we learn. That's my boy. And the other students? Making friends? Hermione Granger, the girl I met on the train, she's brilliant. Understands both worlds and asks the right questions. She's helping me document spell effects and energy signatures. Sounds like you found your pepper, Tony quipped. Dad, Harry protested, feeling his cheeks warm. Just saying. Smart is sexy. We're 11. Fine, fine. Smart is intellectually stimulating. Better? Harry rolled his eyes, grateful Tony couldn't see him. The other Ravenclaws are mostly friendly, though some are a bit put off by my questions about why spells work rather than just accepting that they do. That's the difference between users and innovators, kid. Most people are content to follow the manual. We rewrite it. Their conversation continued for another half hour, covering everything from Harry's classes to Tony's latest suit modifications to strategies for handling the Ministry's concerns. By the time they disconnected, Harry felt more centered, reminded that despite the magical castle surrounding him, his connection to the technological world remained strong. Winter descended on Hogwarts, blanketing the grounds in snow and transforming the Black Lake into a vast ice sheet. Inside the castle, roaring fires and warming charms kept students comfortable as they approached the end of their first term. Harry and Hermione had claimed a secluded corner of the Ravenclaw common room as their research base, surrounded by books on magical theory and Harry's discreetly deployed sensors. Their friendship had deepened through shared intellectual curiosity and complementary perspectives, Hermione bringing exhaustive knowledge of magical literature and tradition, Harry contributing scientific methodology and technological understanding. The energy pattern of Wingardium Leviosa is nearly identical to the signature from accidental magic when levitating objects, Harry noted, comparing readings on his tablet. But the wand focuses the output, making it roughly 60% more efficient. Hermione leaned over his shoulder, her bushy hair tickling his cheek as she studied the data. That supports Adalbert Waffling's fifth principle of fundamental magic, directed intention magnifies effect. Which means theoretically, we could replicate the focusing properties of a wand through technological means, Harry mused. But why would you want to? Asked Terry Boot, another Ravenclaw first year who had joined their study sessions. Wands work perfectly well. Innovation, Harry replied simply. Understanding the principles behind magic opens up new possibilities. Why limit ourselves to methods developed centuries ago? Terry shook his head. Sounds like Muggle thinking to me. No offense, he added quickly. None taken, Harry said, though Hermione frowned. But consider this, wizards created the night bus, magical cameras, the wireless network. They adapted magical principles to serve new functions. That's the same kind of innovation I'm talking about, just with a different foundation. Their theoretical discussions continued until curfew approached. As students began drifting toward their dormitories, Professor Flitwick, the tiny charms teacher and head of Ravenclaw, entered the common room. Mr. Potter, he squeaked, a moment, please. Harry followed the diminutive professor to a quiet corner, curiosity piqued. I've received a most unusual request, Flitwick said, producing a sealed letter. From your father. He wishes permission for you to return home briefly next weekend for what he describes as an urgent family matter. Harry frowned, taking the letter. Tony's handwriting was unmistakable on the envelope, but they had just spoken yesterday with no mention of any urgent matter. Did he explain the nature of the emergency? Only that it pertains to Stark Industries' business requiring your specific input, and that you would return within 24 hours. Flitwick studied Harry with keen eyes. Normally, we don't permit students to leave during term except for the gravest circumstances. However, given your unique situation. Harry broke the seal, scanning the contents quickly. The letter was vintage Tony, stating that he needed Harry home for an urgent demonstration involving their special research and promising to return him promptly. Between the lines, Harry read a clear message: something significant had developed with their magical technology integration. It does seem important, Professor, Harry said carefully. And I'd be back before classes on Monday. Flitwick tugged thoughtfully at his mustache. Very well. Professor Dumbledore has approved a special port key for Saturday morning. But I must emphasize that this is an exception, not to become a regular occurrence. Of course, sir. Thank you. As Harry returned to his dormitory, mind racing with possibilities, he found Hermione waiting at the bottom of the spiral staircase to the boys' rooms. What did Professor Flitwick want? She asked. Harry glanced around to ensure privacy before whispering, Dad wants me home this weekend. Says it's urgent. Is something wrong? I don't think so. More likely he's made a breakthrough with our research and wants to show me in person. Hermione bit her lip. The Ministry won't like that. The Ministry doesn't need to know, Harry replied. Besides, it's just a visit home. Nothing in the rules against that. Just be careful, Harry. The magical world is very protective of its traditions. Harry nodded, recognizing the genuine concern in her voice. Always am. See you at breakfast. Hermione smiled, worries temporarily set aside. Of course. Don't forget we still have that potions essay to finish. As Harry climbed the stairs to his dormitory, anticipation built in his chest. Whatever Tony had discovered, it must be significant to arrange this midterm visit. Despite the growing political tensions between his two worlds, Harry couldn't suppress his excitement at the prospect of returning to the laboratory where he felt most at home, where magic and science merged into something greater than either alone. The port key deposited Harry directly into the secure area of Tony's private lab in Stark Tower. He landed on his feet, having mastered the disorienting magical transportation method during previous trips between New York and London. Welcome back, young Master Potter, Jarvis greeted him. Sir is concluding a call and will join you momentarily. Thanks, Jarvis. Any developments I should know about? Several, though Sir has requested the privilege of explaining them himself. He has been quite animated regarding certain breakthroughs achieved in your absence. Harry smiled, setting down his small overnight bag and taking in the familiar environment. The lab had evolved since his departure for Hogwarts. New equipment lined the walls, holographic displays showed complex equations and designs, and in the center stood a gleaming work platform surrounded by robotic arms. There he is. Tony's voice rang out as he strode into the lab, arms wide. The wizard returns from Hogwarts School of Pointy Hats and Magic Sticks. Harry grinned, meeting Tony halfway for a tight hug. I've missed you too, Dad. Tony held him at arm's length, examining him with a critical eye. You've grown an inch. And is that a burn mark on your sleeve? Please tell me it's from something scientifically interesting and not just bad cooking. Potions accident. Seamus Finnegan has a talent for making cauldrons explode. Harry looked around eagerly. So what's the big emergency that couldn't wait for Christmas break? Tony's eyes gleamed with excitement. Remember our discussion about creating an energy storage system for magical output? The one you said was theoretical until we could find a sustainable magical energy source. Theoretical no more. Tony guided Harry to a sealed chamber at the far end of the lab. After your last data transmission on focused magical energy patterns, I had a breakthrough. If magic leaves distinct energy signatures that can be measured, then theoretically, those signatures could be replicated, Harry finished, eyes widening as comprehension dawned. You built a magical energy synthesizer. Even better. Tony entered his security code, and the chamber door slid open to reveal a glowing blue device approximately the size of a basketball. I built a magical energy amplifier. It doesn't create magical energy from nothing, that would violate too many laws of physics even for me, but it can take a small magical input and multiply its effect through a specialized arc reactor core. Harry approached the device cautiously, recognizing elements of both Stark technology and runic patterns he'd studied at Hogwarts. This changes everything. That's just the beginning. Tony activated a holographic display showing schematics for what appeared to be a gauntlet. I've integrated your arcane interface design with my repulsor technology. With this amplifier as a power source, we could create a suit that doesn't just channel magic, it enhances it. Harry circled the display, mind racing with possibilities. The Ministry of Magic would never approve this. The Ministry doesn't have jurisdiction over technological innovation, Tony countered. Yes, it incorporates magical principles, but the core technology is scientific. It falls into the same gray area as your communication device. A much bigger, more powerful gray area, Harry noted wryly. Tony shrugged, unapologetic. Innovation always exists in gray areas, kid. That's where the interesting stuff happens. For the next several hours, father and son immersed themselves in testing the amplifier, refining calculations, and modifying designs. Harry shared insights from his magical education that suggested improvements, while Tony applied engineering solutions to problems of stability and control. As evening approached, they moved from the lab to the penthouse living area, where Pepper had arranged dinner. She welcomed Harry with a warm hug and an assessing look remarkably similar to Tony's. "You look healthy," she pronounced, smoothing his perpetually unruly hair. "Is the food good at Hogwarts?" "Amazing," Harry confirmed, dropping onto the sofa with comfortable familiarity. "Though nothing beats your Thai takeout nights." "Flattery will get you everywhere," Pepper smiled, handing him a plate. "Now tell me about school." "Tony only talks about your research data, but I want to hear about your friends, your classes, everything non-technical." Harry launched into stories about Hogwarts life, the moving staircases, the ghosts that drifted through walls, the Quidditch matches where students zoomed on broomsticks high above the ground. He described the Ravenclaw common room with its star-patterned ceiling and the way Professor Flitwick had nearly fallen off his stack of books when Harry had successfully performed a perfect levitation charm on his first attempt. "And Hermione?" Pepper asked with a knowing smile. "You mention her in every letter." Harry felt his cheeks warm slightly. "She's brilliant. Best in our year at nearly everything. She understands both magical theory and scientific method, which makes her the perfect research partner." "Research partner," Tony echoed with a smirk. "Is that what the kids are calling it these days?" "Dad," Harry groaned. "We're first years." "Just saying, intellectual compatibility is the foundation of any good relationship." "Right, Pep." Pepper rolled her eyes. "Don't tease him, Tony." She turned back to Harry. "I think it's wonderful you found a friend who shares your interests." Their conversation continued into the evening, comfortable and familiar despite the months of separation. Harry realized how much he'd missed this, the easy banter, the blend of personal and intellectual exchange, the feeling of being completely understood. At Hogwarts, despite finding friendship with Hermione and acceptance among the Ravenclaws, he still stood apart as someone straddling two distinct worlds. Later, as Harry prepared for bed in his room, preserved exactly as he'd left it in September, Tony appeared in the doorway. "Got a minute for one more surprise?" Harry nodded, following Tony back to the lab, curiosity piqued. Tony led him to a workbench where a slender metallic device lay cushioned on a protective pad. "What is it?" Harry asked, studying the object. It resembled a wand in basic shape but was clearly technological in nature, with a subtle blue glow emanating from inlaid circuitry. The next evolution of your arcane interface, Tony explained, lifting the device carefully. This prototype combines wandcraft principles with arc reactor technology. I call it the arcane conductor. Harry took it reverently, feeling a subtle vibration as it responded to his touch. It's keyed to my magical signature. Biometrically locked to you, yes. Try channeling a simple spell through it. Harry focused, thinking of the Lumos spell they'd learned recently. To his amazement, the tip of the device illuminated with a light far brighter than any first-year spell should produce. The amplification effect is incredible. More controlled than wandless magic, more powerful than a standard wand, and completely undetectable by ministry monitoring. Tony's expression grew serious. This isn't a toy, Harry. It's a backup. If you ever find yourself in danger, magical danger, this could give you an edge no one would expect. Harry extinguished the light, considering the implications. You're worried about something. Tony hesitated, then nodded. S.H.I.E.L.D's been monitoring increased activity in certain magical enclaves. Nothing specific, but Fury mentioned concerns about remnants of Voldemort's followers showing interest in your return to the magical world. Death Eaters, Harry murmured, recalling the history books he'd studied. But Voldemort's been gone for 10 years. Extremism doesn't die easily. Tony placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. This is just precautionary. The same reason I have suits stationed around the world. Hope for the best, plan for the worst, Harry finished. I understand. As they returned upstairs, Harry clutching the arcane conductor carefully, he felt the weight of his dual identity more acutely than ever. At Hogwarts, he was Harry Potter, the boy who lived, sorting through complicated magical heritage while trying to be a normal student. In New York, he was Harry Stark, technological innovator, bridging magical principles and scientific advancement. Neither identity was complete without the other, yet the gap between his worlds seemed to widen with each new development. Hey, Tony said softly, reading his expression. One day at a time, kid. We'll figure it out. Harry nodded, grateful for the understanding. One day at a time. Harry's return to Hogwarts generated significant curiosity among his classmates. Rumors spread rapidly, that he'd been called home for a secret mission, that Stark Industries was developing magic-resistant weapons, that he was transferring to an American magical school. Harry deflected questions with practiced ease, sharing only that he'd been needed for a family matter. Hermione, however, was not so easily misdirected. She cornered him in a quiet section of the library their first evening back. What really happened, she whispered, brown eyes intense. And don't say, family business again. You've been practically vibrating with excitement since you got back. Harry glanced around to ensure privacy before leaning close. Dad's created something revolutionary. A device that can amplify magical energy output. Hermione's eyes widened. That should be impossible without a magical core. That's the breakthrough. He's found a way to synthesize the effect using modified arc reactor technology combined with runic amplification matrices. Harry, that's... Hermione hesitated. That's amazing, but also potentially dangerous. The Ministry has no authority over Muggle technology, Harry finished. That's the loophole. The device itself isn't magical, it just interfaces with and enhances magical energy. Hermione bit her lip. I'm not sure the Ministry will appreciate that distinction. Which is why we're being careful. Harry pulled out his charms textbook, signaling a shift to a less sensitive topic as a group of Hufflepuffs passed their table. How far did you get on Flitwick's essay? The next several months settled into a rhythm, classes, research, discreet communication with Tony, and the gradual integration of Harry's magical education with his technological background. He excelled in classes that required theoretical understanding, particularly charms and transfiguration, while finding potions challenging less for its complexity and more for Professor Snape's evident dislike of him. Throughout it all, Harry maintained careful documentation of magical principles, energy signatures, and spell mechanics, transmitting encrypted data to Tony through their secure communication channel. Each transmission was followed by discussions of potential applications, refinements to their shared theories, and occasional debates about the ethical implications of their work. Spring arrived at Hogwarts, melting the snow and bringing new energy to the castle. Students spent more time on the grounds, studying beneath trees or watching Quidditch practices in the mild sunshine. Harry and Hermione often claimed a spot by the lake, books spread around them as they debated magical theory. The problem with most magical research, Hermione was saying one Saturday afternoon, is that it focuses on discovering new spells rather than understanding the fundamental principles that make all spells work. Exactly, Harry agreed, sketching a diagram in his notebook. It's like inventing new applications without advancing the underlying operating system. What a thoroughly Muggle analogy, came a drawling voice from behind them. Draco Malfoy stood there, flanked by his ever-present companions, Crabbe and Goyle. Harry glanced up, unsurprised. The Slytherin boy had made a habit of needling him throughout the year, seemingly offended by Harry's dual heritage. "Was there something you wanted, Malfoy?" "Just curious what the great Harry Potter is scribbling so intently. Planning to revolutionize magic with Muggle science?" His tone made the suggestion sound absurd. "Something like that," Harry replied mildly. Malfoy's eyes narrowed. "My father says your experiments are an affront to magical tradition. That the Ministry should never have allowed you to be raised by a Muggle, celebrity or not." "Your father is entitled to his opinion," Harry said, maintaining his composure. "Just as I'm entitled to ignore it." A flush of anger crossed Malfoy's pale face. "You think being Harry Potter makes you special? Above our laws and traditions?" "No," Harry replied, standing to face Malfoy directly. "I think being raised to question rather than simply accept makes me different. Not better, just different." Malfoy seemed momentarily thrown by the lack of hostility in Harry's response. "The Malfoy family has been magical for centuries. We understand our world in ways half-bloods and Muggle-raised could never comprehend." "Maybe," Harry conceded. "Or maybe fresh perspectives are exactly what the magical world needs to evolve." The standoff continued for another tense moment before Malfoy huffed and turned away, muttering something that sounded like, "Wait until summer," as he and his cronies retreated across the lawn. "What do you suppose he meant by that?" Hermione asked, watching them go. Harry shrugged. "Probably nothing specific. Just trying to have the last word." But the encounter left him unsettled. Throughout the year, he detected increasing tension between traditional magical families and those who, like himself, proposed integrating Muggle perspectives. Professor Dumbledore had mentioned during one of their occasional meetings that the Ministry was debating new regulations concerning magical Muggle interactions, debates sparked largely by Harry's unique situation and Tony's involvement in the magical world. As the school year approached its end, these political undercurrents grew more pronounced. Harry noticed increased scrutiny from certain professors, particularly Snape, who seemed to watch him with calculated suspicion during potions classes. Twice, Harry caught glimpses of Ministry officials visiting Dumbledore, their expressions grave as they passed him in corridors. Then came the night that changed everything. Harry woke suddenly, heart pounding, unsure what had disturbed his sleep. The Ravenclaw dormitory was quiet, his roommate's steady breathing the only sound. He reached for his glasses, then froze as his modified communication device vibrated urgently on his bedside table. Slipping out of bed, Harry drew his curtains and activated the device. Tony's face appeared on the small screen, his expression tense, background showing the interior of what appeared to be the Iron Man suit. "Harry, thank God," Tony's voice came through the secure channel. "Are you somewhere private? Give me a second." Harry grabbed his invisibility cloak, a Christmas gift from an anonymous sender that Dumbledore had hinted came from his birth father, and slipped out of the dormitory, finding an empty classroom before responding. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "New York is under attack," Tony said grimly. "Aliens." Actual aliens coming through a portal above the tower. Harry stared in disbelief. Aliens? Is this some kind of joke? I wish, Tony replied, and something in his voice, a strain Harry had never heard before, confirmed the impossible truth. Loki, Thor's brother, yes, apparently Norse gods are real too, added to the list. He's opened a gateway using the Tesseract. We've got a team responding, but this is big, Harry. A team? What team? Later. Listen, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Hogwarts is probably the safest place you could be right now. S.H.I.E.L.D. has contingencies if things go sideways here. Fury will contact magical authorities to secure you if necessary. Harry's mind reeled, trying to process this information. Let me come home. I can help. Absolutely not, Tony cut him off sharply. This is beyond anything we've trained for. Promise me you'll stay put. Before Harry could respond, an explosion sounded in the background of Tony's feed. Gotta go, kid. Remember what I said. Stay safe. I'll contact you when it's over. The connection ended abruptly, leaving Harry staring at a blank screen in the darkened classroom. Aliens in New York. Tony fighting alongside some kind of team. The normalcy of his Hogwarts existence suddenly seemed surreal in comparison. Harry paced the classroom, mind racing. He needed to see what was happening, needed more information than the brief, chaotic glimpse Tony had provided. But how? Standard news wouldn't reach Hogwarts, and even if it did, the magical world paid little attention to Muggle events. Then it hit him, the arcane conductor Tony had given him. With its enhanced capabilities, he might be able to establish a more powerful connection, perhaps even tap into satellite feeds or news broadcasts despite Hogwarts' magical interference. Harry raced back to his dormitory, silently retrieving the device from its hidden compartment in his trunk. Returning to the empty classroom, he set up a small array of sensors and amplifiers he'd been using for his research, connecting them to the conductor in a makeshift system. Jarvis, he whispered, focusing his magic through the device. Emergency override Potter Alpha 5. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air before him shimmered, and a holographic display materialized, weak and flickering, but visible. Jarvis's voice came through, distorted but intelligible. Young Master Potter. I am operating on emergency protocols. Tower systems are compromised, but backup servers remain functional. Show me New York, Harry commanded. Live feed. The hologram shifted, revealing chaotic scenes of Manhattan under attack. Massive alien creatures flew through the sky, smaller ones swarming through streets as civilians fled in terror. Buildings were damaged, cars overturned, fires burning across the cityscape. And there, a flash of red and gold as Iron Man soared between skyscrapers, blasting aliens with repulsor beams. Harry watched in horror and fascination as other figures joined the battle, a man in a red, white, and blue uniform wielding a shield, a giant green creature smashing aliens with incredible strength, a red-haired woman fighting with astonishing skill, a man with a bow firing impossible shots, and a caped figure summoning lightning from the sky. The Avengers, Jarvis explained, apparently reading Harry's confusion. A response team assembled by S.H.I.E.L.D. Sir is a consultant. For nearly an hour, Harry observed the battle unfolding across New York, his heart in his throat each time Tony disappeared from view or took a particularly hard hit. He watched as the team fought with increasing coordination, driving back the alien forces but seemingly unable to close the portal, continuing to spew invaders into the sky above Stark Tower. Then, to Harry's horror, he saw Tony intercept what appeared to be a nuclear missile, redirecting it toward the portal. The feed flickered as Jarvis's system struggled to maintain the connection across the magical interference. No, Harry whispered, watching Tony disappear into the portal with the missile. No, no, no. Seconds stretched like eternity. The portal began to close. And then, just as the opening shrank to nothing, a small figure fell back through. Iron Man, plummeting lifelessly toward the ground. The feed cut out. Jarvis! Harry shouted, forgetting stealth in his panic. Jarvis, reconnect. What happened? No response came. The conductor had overheated from the extended connection, its surface glowing hot in Harry's hand. He set it down carefully, heart pounding, unsure if he'd just witnessed his father's death miles away while he sat helpless in a Scottish castle. Harry sank to the floor, emotions overwhelming him. For the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, the separation between his worlds seemed not just challenging but cruel, trapping him away from where he desperately needed to be. Potter? What are you doing out of bed? Harry looked up to find Professor Flitwick in the doorway, wand illuminated, expression shifting from stern to concerned as he took in Harry's obvious distress. It's my father, Harry managed. New York is under attack. He couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too painful to voice. Flitwick moved quickly to Harry's side. Come with me. Quickly now. The tiny professor led Harry through darkened corridors to Dumbledore's office. To Harry's surprise, the headmaster was awake and dressed despite the late hour, as if expecting them. Harry, Dumbledore greeted him gently. I believe you've had disturbing news. You know? Harry asked, stunned. About the attack? I have certain methods of staying informed about significant events in both worlds, Dumbledore explained. Particularly when they might affect my students. My dad, Harry said urgently. He was taking a nuclear missile into the portal, and then he fell, and the connection cut out. Dumbledore raised a calming hand. I have just received word that Tony Stark is alive, Harry. Injured but alive. The crisis in New York has been contained. Relief washed over Harry so intensely that his knees nearly buckled. I need to go to him. And so you shall, Dumbledore nodded. I've taken the liberty of preparing an emergency portkey. Professor Flitwick will escort you to New York immediately. Harry blinked, surprised by Dumbledore's ready accommodation. Thank you. The bonds between parent and child transcend the divisions between our worlds, Harry, Dumbledore said softly. I may have had reservations about your adoption years ago, but I have observed the profound connection between you and Tony Stark. In times of crisis, that connection takes precedence over school rules. Minutes later, Harry clutched a small silver object as Professor Flitwick counted down. With a violent tug behind his navel, Hogwarts disappeared, and Harry found himself standing in a secure area of what remained of Stark Tower's upper floors. Parts of the building had been severely damaged, windows shattered, furniture and equipment destroyed. Through a gaping hole in one wall, Harry could see emergency vehicles' lights flashing across Manhattan. Mr. Potter Stark, a familiar voice greeted him. Nick Fury stood nearby, his leather coat dusty and torn, a cut visible on his forehead. Your timing is impeccable. Medical just cleared your father for visitors. Where is he? Harry demanded. This way. Fury led Harry and Flitwick through debris-strewn corridors to a makeshift medical area where Tony lay on a bed, oxygen mask over his face, but eyes open and alert. When he spotted Harry, he immediately tried to sit up, wincing in pain. Easy, Mr. Stark, admonished a doctor, gently restraining him. 3 cracked ribs, remember. Harry rushed to Tony's side, relief and residual fear creating a lump in his throat. Tony reached up, pulling the oxygen mask aside. Hey, kid. Surprised to see you. Dumbledore sent me, Harry explained, taking Tony's hand. I saw, through the conductor, I connected to Jarvis and saw everything until you went through the portal. Ah. Tony squeezed his hand. Sorry you had to see that. Not my finest hour. You nearly died, Harry said, voice catching. But didn't. Tony attempted a smile. Takes more than an alien invasion and a little space travel to get rid of me. Harry laughed weakly, the sound halfway to a sob. I was so scared. Me too, Tony admitted quietly. When I was up there, all I could think was. I wasn't done being your dad yet. The simple honesty of the statement broke through Harry's composure. He leaned forward carefully, mindful of Tony's injuries, and hugged him gently. They stayed that way for several moments, the chaos of the aftermath continuing around them, neither caring who witnessed the display of emotion. When Harry finally straightened, he noticed other people in the room, the team he'd seen fighting alongside Tony. They stood at a respectful distance, observing the reunion with varying expressions of interest and empathy. Tony followed his gaze. Right. Introductions. Harry, meet the Avengers. Team, this is my son, Harry. A blond, muscular man in the torn red, white, and blue uniform stepped forward first. Steve Rogers, he said, extending his hand. Your father fought bravely today. He's always brave, Harry replied, shaking the offered hand. Sometimes stupidly so. That drew a laugh from the red-haired woman. I like this kid, she said to Tony. Natasha Romanoff, she added to Harry with a nod. The others introduced themselves in turn: Clint Barton, the archer; Bruce Banner, now human-sized and mild-mannered despite being the green creature Harry had witnessed smashing aliens; and Thor, who did indeed appear to be the actual Norse god of legend. The son of Stark possesses magical energy, Thor observed, studying Harry with interest. Similar to the energies of Asgard, yet distinct. Harry tensed, unsure how much Tony had shared about his abilities. Harry's got some unique talents, Tony said carefully. Part of what makes him special. Your father has spoken of your intelligence and character, Thor continued, though he mentioned not your magical nature. It's not generally information we broadcast, Harry replied, glancing questioningly at Tony. They've all signed NDAs, Tony assured him. And after today, I think wizard ranks pretty low on the weird scale. The group's conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a medical team insisting on moving Tony to a proper facility. As they prepared him for transport, Fury pulled Harry aside. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been monitoring an increase in communications among certain magical factions since the battle began, he said in a low voice. The attack made global news, impossible to contain, and your connection to Stark is public record. You think this will draw attention from the magical world? Harry asked. I think you should be prepared for increased scrutiny from both sides of your life, Fury replied. The Battle of New York just changed everything: public awareness of extraterrestrial threats, superhuman capabilities, and the existence of teams like the Avengers. The magical world won't be able to ignore these developments entirely. Harry considered this, watching as the medical team carefully transferred Tony to a gurney. I've been straddling both worlds my whole life, Director Fury. This just makes it official. The final weeks of the school year passed in a blur of examinations, rumors, and political maneuverings. News of the Battle of New York had indeed penetrated the magical world, creating ripples of concern among students and staff alike. For Harry, returning to the peaceful Scottish castle after witnessing alien invaders in Manhattan felt surreal, as if he were living in parallel realities that occasionally, violently intersected. On the last evening before summer break, Harry sat with Hermione at the edge of the lake, watching the giant squid lazily wave its tentacles in the golden sunset. You're worried about something, Hermione observed, setting aside the book she'd been reading. Is it about your father? His recovery? Dad's fine, Harry assured her. Better than new, actually. The attack gave him ideas for about a dozen suit upgrades. He hesitated. It's more about what happens next. The Ministry's been making noise about restricting my access to the Muggle world, claiming security concerns after New York. They can't do that, Hermione protested. You're Tony Stark's legal son. They're arguing that my presence in his household represents an increasing breach of the statute of secrecy, especially now that he's publicly associated with the Avengers. Harry tossed a stone into the lake, watching ripples spread across the surface. Dumbledore's fighting it, but there's significant support for tighter restrictions. Hermione frowned. That's ridiculous. If anything, the Battle of New York proves that Muggles are dealing with threats potentially more dangerous than anything in the magical world. Aliens. Actual extraterrestrials. Which is exactly what scares the traditionalists, Harry pointed out. They've maintained separation based on the belief that Muggles couldn't handle knowledge of the magical world. Now Muggles are handling interdimensional portals and alien invasions. So what will you do? Harry shrugged. What I've always done. Navigate both worlds as best I can, push boundaries where necessary, respect them where appropriate. He smiled slightly. Dad and I have summer projects planned that will definitely push some boundaries. The arcane amplifier. Among other things. Harry's expression grew serious. Seeing what happened in New York, how unprepared Earth was for that level of threat, it changed something in Dad. He's talking about building more advanced suits, global defense systems, protective measures on a scale I've never heard him discuss before. And you'll help him? Hermione asked quietly. I have to, Harry replied simply. I've seen both worlds now, Hermione. The magical threats, the technological ones, the alien ones. They're all real, all dangerous. If I can help bridge those worlds, create protections that draw from multiple sources of knowledge. You might save lives, Hermione finished. I understand. She hesitated, then added, I've been doing some independent research. On magical theory and how it might intersect with physics and engineering principles. If you wanted another perspective this summer. Harry brightened. You'd be willing to help? Even with the ministry getting twitchy? Of course, Hermione said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. That's what friends do. Besides, I'm rather good at research. The best, Harry agreed, bumping her shoulder affectionately. Dad will be thrilled. He's been asking when he gets to meet the brilliant Ms. Granger. As they made plans for summer collaboration, neither noticed the figure watching them from the castle, Albus Dumbledore, his expression thoughtful as he observed the two young Ravenclaws whose friendship might well reshape the relationship between magical and Muggle worlds. Ezekiel Stain stared at the surveillance footage playing on his computer screen, eyes narrow with concentration. The images showed Harry Potter Stark entering Stark Tower during the aftermath of the alien attack, accompanied by a tiny man in what appeared to be medieval robes. Pause, he commanded. The footage froze on a frame capturing Harry raising what looked like a slender stick. Magnify. The image zoomed in, revealing the boy performing what could only be described as magic, levitating debris to clear a path. Ezekiel leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. His father, Obadiah, had been obsessed with Tony Stark's technology, had died trying to possess it. But Ezekiel had always taken a broader view. Technology was merely one form of power. True dominance came from controlling forces others didn't understand. And now, it seemed, Tony Stark had unwittingly revealed an entirely new source of power. His adopted son wielded abilities that defied conventional science. Magic, if such a primitive term applied. Mr. Stain, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. The specialist you requested has arrived. Send him in. The door opened to admit a tall, thin man with lank blonde hair and a perpetually sour expression. This better be worth my time, Stain. I don't usually consort with Muggles. Ezekiel smiled thinly. I believe you'll find this particular Muggle has something of interest to offer, Mr. Rookwood. Please, sit down. Let me tell you about Harry Potter, Tony Stark, and a fascinating intersection of worlds I intend to exploit. The former Death Eater raised an eyebrow, suddenly attentive. Potter? The Potter boy? Indeed. It seems the boy who lived has been quite busy in the Muggle world. And I'm very interested in what he's been building. As Ezekiel shared what he discovered, Augustus Rookwood's expression shifted from skepticism to calculating interest. Two men from different worlds, united by ambition and a common target, the boy who straddled the divide between magic and technology, unknowingly creating the tools that might one day be turned against both his worlds. Chapter 4, Avenger Ascendant. The repulsor blast, enhanced with a precisely modulated disarming charm, struck the training dummy with surgical precision, severing its wand arm without damaging the rest of the target. Harry followed with a graceful aerial somersault, magical shields shimmering around his midnight blue armor as he landed behind a second dummy that was firing simulated dark magic. A flick of his gauntlet wrist deployed a containment field that wrapped around the target like a cocoon of silver blue energy. "Simulation complete," announced Jarvis. "All hostiles neutralized. Time, 27 seconds. New personal record, young sir." Harry's helmet retracted, revealing his face, now that of a 17-year-old with sharper features than the boy who had first experimented with magical technological integration. 2 years of refinement, combat experience, and intensive training had transformed both Harry and his prototype suit into something unprecedented in either the magical or technological worlds. "Run it again," Harry said, rolling his shoulders. "Increase difficulty by 20% and add the anti-apparition variables." "Are you planning to leave any challenge for the rest of us mere mortals?" came Tony's voice from the doorway of the specialized training facility they'd constructed beneath Stark Tower. The space combined elements of both magical and technological testing environments, allowing for comprehensive simulation of hybrid threats. Harry grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Just making sure the Mark 7 integration is fully calibrated. The new magical core synchronization still feels a little sluggish during rapid transitions." "Sluggish by your standards means microsecond delays that literally no one else would notice," Tony pointed out, approaching to examine the armor's diagnostic readings displayed on a nearby holographic screen. "The integration is operating at 97.8% efficiency. That's better than we projected." "It could be better," Harry insisted, though not without a hint of pride. The Mark 7 arcane armor represented 2 years of continuous refinement since the Boston incident. Each iteration had pushed the boundaries of what was possible in magical technological integration. "Hermione called," Tony said, changing the subject. "She's arriving tomorrow instead of Wednesday. Something about finishing her research at the Department of Mysteries ahead of schedule." Harry failed to hide the smile that immediately brightened his features. "Did she mention whether she's bringing the new runic matrices we discussed?" "I didn't ask about magical technobabble, kid. But judging by that reaction, I should have told you she was coming earlier. Would have saved me an hour of watching you obsess over fractional performance improvements." Harry rolled his eyes, though his expression remained lighter than moments before. The integration of arithmancy principles into the magical core's operational algorithms could potentially increase efficiency by at least, "Save it for Hermione," Tony interrupted, checking his watch. "We've got the Avengers briefing in 30 minutes. Fury doesn't appreciate tardiness, even from magical Wonder Boy prodigies." As Harry commanded the suit's disassembly sequence, the armor separating into component pieces with fluid precision, he contemplated how much had changed in 2 years. After the Boston confrontation, their first real combat deployment of the prototype suits, they had been officially brought into the Avengers initiative. Though initially classified as consultants due to Harry's age, they had gradually become integral members of the team, particularly for missions involving suspected magical elements. The relationship between magical and Muggle authorities had grown increasingly strained as more hybrid incidents occurred. The Ministry of Magic maintained its traditional stance of separation and secrecy, while S.H.I.E.L.D. advocated for controlled integration and information sharing. Harry and Tony occupied the increasingly narrow middle ground between worlds, developing technologies and strategies that could address threats from both sides. And throughout it all, Harry's collaboration with Hermione had deepened into something neither of them had explicitly defined but both increasingly relied upon. Her brilliance with magical theory complemented his intuitive understanding of both magic and technology, creating innovations neither could have achieved alone. That their working relationship had evolved to include lingering glances, casual touches that weren't entirely casual, and a constant awareness of each other's presence was something Harry was still learning to navigate. "You coming, or are you busy daydreaming about a certain British witch?" Tony called from the doorway. Harry shook his head, following his father toward the elevator. Just thinking about the briefing. Fury wouldn't call everyone in unless something significant had developed. My money's on Stain, Tony replied, his expression darkening. S.H.I.E.L.D's been tracking unusual energy signatures in Eastern Europe for weeks. The pattern matches the hybrid technology we encountered in Boston, but significantly enhanced. If Stain's operation has gone international on that scale, it means he's found more magical collaborators, Harry noted as they entered the elevator. The Boston attackers were using relatively crude implementations, magically speaking. But with proper magical expertise, the potential applications become exponentially more dangerous, Tony finished. Which is why we need to be one step ahead. The elevator ascended smoothly to the Avengers secure conference level that Tony had incorporated into the newly redesigned Stark Tower. As the doors opened, Harry straightened his shoulders almost unconsciously, adopting the professional demeanor he'd cultivated for these settings. At 17, he remained the youngest member of the initiative by a significant margin, but 2 years of proven field performance had earned him a respect that transcended age considerations. The conference room was already occupied when they arrived. Nick Fury stood at the head of the table, his imposing presence commanding attention despite the room's other notable occupants. Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff sat reviewing data tablets, while Bruce Banner conversed quietly with Thor near the windows overlooking Manhattan. Stark. Potter Stark, Fury acknowledged as they entered. Now that everyone's here, we can begin. The holographic display at the center of the table activated, showing satellite imagery of what appeared to be an industrial facility nestled in a remote mountainous region. This compound was identified 3 weeks ago in northern Romania. On the surface, it's a medical research facility owned by a subsidiary of Stain International. Officially, they're developing treatments for rare genetic disorders. And unofficially? Steve prompted, studying the image with a tactician's eye. Unofficially, they're generating energy readings unlike anything we've recorded since Boston. Fury manipulated the display to show thermal and energy scans of the facility, highlighting unusual patterns concentrated in what appeared to be subterranean levels. Our analysis suggests they've achieved significant advances in integrating magical energy with technological delivery systems. The readings are more structured than previous samples, Harry noted, examining the data with practiced assessment. They've solved the instability issues that plagued their earlier prototypes. Which means they've recruited more skilled magical assistants, Tony added. Rookwood was good, but this level of integration suggests someone with even more advanced knowledge. Precisely our assessment, Fury confirmed. Intelligence suggests Stain has formed an alliance with this man. The display changed to show a tall, aristocratic figure with platinum blonde hair. Lucius Malfoy. Former Death Eater who avoided imprisonment by claiming to be under magical mind control during Voldemort's first rise. Politically connected in the magical world, wealthy in both economies, and possessing extensive knowledge of dark magical artifacts. Harry felt a cold sensation settle in his stomach. Draco's father, he murmured. I suspected he might be involved, given Draco's comments at school, but I had no proof. You know this individual? Thor inquired. His son was in my year at Hogwarts. Not exactly friendly terms. Harry understated the years of tension between himself and the younger Malfoy, whose jealousy of Harry's unique position bridging magical and muggle worlds had evolved from schoolboy rivalry to genuine hostility. Lucius Malfoy represents the most traditional faction of magical society, those who believe in pureblood superiority and strict separation from the muggle world. Which makes his collaboration with a muggle like Stain all the more concerning, Natasha observed. People don't typically violate their core beliefs unless they see extraordinary potential gain. Or they share a common enemy, Harry suggested quietly. You, Bruce concluded, looking at Harry and Tony. Your integration of magic and technology threatens both Stain's market dominance and Malfoy's vision of magical superiority. We believe they're developing weapons specifically designed to counter your armors, Fury confirmed. But more concerning is evidence suggesting larger-scale applications. The energy readings from this facility are consistent with what we'd expect from attempts to harness magical energy for mass deployment. Magical weapons of mass destruction, Tony translated grimly. That's our working theory. Fury's expression was stone. Which brings us to the purpose of this briefing. We need to know exactly what they're developing, how far along they are, and what their deployment timeline looks like. You want us to infiltrate the facility, Steve surmised. A surgical strike team, Fury nodded. In and out with minimal engagement. This is an intelligence-gathering mission, not an assault. The magical defenses will be substantial, Harry cautioned. If Malfoy's involved, we can expect everything from detection wards to lethal defensive enchantments. Standard shield infiltration protocols won't be sufficient. Which is why you'll be taking point on magical countermeasures, Fury replied. Rogers will lead the overall operation, but you'll handle the magical security aspects. Harry nodded, mind already cataloging the specific protective enchantments and countermeasures they would need. I'll need to develop custom ward-breaking protocols for the armor. And we should bring specific runic disruptors for anticipated defensive schemes. Exactly the kind of specialized preparation we need, Fury approved. You have 48 hours before deployment. Full tactical briefing tomorrow at 0900. Dr. Banner will remain as technical support, coordinating from the helicarrier. The rest of you will comprise the infiltration team. As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to begin preparations, Tony caught Harry's arm. You okay with this? Malfoy's connected to your world in ways Stain isn't. Harry considered the question seriously. It complicates things politically, but it doesn't change the mission. If anything, it confirms what we've suspected, that opposition to our work comes from both worlds, not just one or the other. Still, going up against the father of a schoolmate. Tony's concern was evident beneath his casual tone. Draco Malfoy stopped being just a schoolmate when he joined the inquisitorial squad that tried to ban all Muggle-derived magic at Hogwarts last year, Harry replied, a hardness entering his voice. His family has made their position clear. We have to respond accordingly. Tony studied his son, noting the maturity in his assessment. At 17, Harry had developed a strategic mindset that balanced his natural compassion with clear-eyed pragmatism, a combination Tony credited partly to the dual influences of magical education and technological problem-solving. All right then, Tony said finally. Let's get to work on those magical countermeasures. And maybe send Hermione a heads up that her vacation is getting a work component. Harry smiled despite the gravity of their situation. Bold of you to assume she wasn't already planning to bring work with her. Hermione Granger had indeed brought work, several expandable magical briefcases full of it. Her arrival at Stark Tower the following morning coincided with the delivery of multiple crates containing specialized equipment from S.H.I.E.L.D., creating a chaotic scene in Tony's primary workshop. I've completed the analysis of traditional Romanian warding techniques, Hermione explained as she unpacked scrolls covered in complex runic formulations. Her hair was tied back in a practical bun, though rebellious strands had already escaped to frame her face. At 18, she had grown into a composed young woman whose brilliance had earned her unprecedented access to the Department of Mysteries despite her age. And? Harry prompted, helping her arrange the materials on a workbench already cluttered with technological components. And they're fundamentally different from British approaches. She spread out a particularly detailed diagram. Romanian magical tradition emphasizes layered intent rather than linguistic precision. Their wards respond to the purpose of the intruder rather than specific counter-incantations. Harry frowned, immediately grasping the implications. So standard ward breaking won't work because the wards will adapt based on our intentions. Precisely. Hermione's eyes lit with the excitement of a complex problem. But I think I've identified a potential workaround. If we can mask our true intentions with a specialized variant of the Confundus charm built into your armor's magical emission field. We could essentially convince the wards we're supposed to be there, Harry completed, already seeing the solution forming. Brilliant, Hermione. Their eyes met over the scattered materials, professional appreciation shifting subtly into something warmer. 2 years of collaboration had created a synchronicity between them that went beyond mere academic partnership. "I've missed this," Hermione admitted quietly. "The department is intellectually stimulating, but no one there truly understands the integration aspects like you do." "The feeling's mutual," Harry replied. "Tony tries, but certain magical concepts just don't translate well to his frame of reference." "I heard that," came Tony's voice as he entered, carrying additional equipment. "And I resent the implication. I've mastered more magical theory than any Muggle in history." "Which is like being the best swimmer among cats," Hermione teased with the comfortable familiarity of long association. "Impressive but limited by nature." Tony clutched his chest in mock offense. "Wounded by the brightest witch of her age. My ego may never recover." He deposited his load on a nearby table. "So what's this about Romanian wards requiring intention manipulation? Sounds suspiciously like mind magic, which I thought was heavily regulated." "It's not exactly mind magic," Hermione corrected. "More like magical misdirection. We're not changing our thoughts, just how they're magically perceived." "Semantics that would make a lawyer proud," Tony remarked. "Does the ministry know you're developing these techniques for a shield operation?" Hermione's expression became more guarded. "Officially, my research at the Department of Mysteries includes studying international warding techniques for security enhancement. How that research is applied is discretionary." Translation: "They don't know and wouldn't approve if they did," Tony interpreted. "Guess I'm not the only bad influence on the youth these days." "The ministry's position on integration remains frustratingly regressive," Hermione said, not denying Tony's assessment. "They're so focused on maintaining separation that they're ignoring the very real threats developing at the intersection of our worlds." "Speaking of which," Harry interjected, returning to the mission preparations, "we need to modify the suit's magical signatures to appear consistent with Eastern European patterns. Romanian magic has a distinctive energy profile, more raw and nature-oriented than the structured British approach." The three of them fell into a familiar rhythm, with Harry bridging magical theory and technological implementation, Hermione providing specialized magical expertise, and Tony handling the advanced engineering aspects. By evening, they had developed a comprehensive set of magical countermeasures integrated into both Harry's and Tony's armors. As they broke for dinner, ordered and rather than interrupting their workflow, Natasha joined them, bringing additional intelligence reports. "Thermal imaging suggests 3 main research areas in the facility's underground levels," she reported, displaying schematics on a tablet. "The largest appears to be some kind of central chamber with unusually high energy readings." Harry studied the imagery with concern. "That pattern, it reminds me of containment fields used for highly volatile magical substances or creatures." "What kind of creatures would generate that energy profile?" Tony asked. Harry exchanged a glance with Hermione before answering. "Several possibilities, none of them good. Dragon heartstrings are used in wand cores because of their magical conductivity. A live dragon would provide exponentially more magical energy, though controlling it would be nearly impossible. Unless they've developed a technological means of magical control," Hermione suggested grimly. "We know they've been experimenting with hybrid control systems." "Let's not jump to dragon conclusions yet," Tony cautioned. "Though I'm disturbed that's even a sentence I had to say." "Rogers wants a final equipment check at 0600, Natasha informed them. "Wheels up at 0700. After she departed, the three continued working on final adjustments to their infiltration gear. Tony eventually retired to catch a few hours of sleep before the mission, leaving Harry and Hermione alone in the workshop. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Hermione inscribing final runic sequences on specialized disruptors while Harry calibrated his armor's magical detection systems. It was Hermione who finally broke the quiet. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" she asked, setting aside her tools. Harry considered the question honestly. "Not about the mission itself. We've done similar operations before. But the Malfoy connection, it makes things more personal. And more politically complicated, Hermione added. If a prominent magical family is definitively linked to these weapons, it will escalate tensions between S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Ministry. Which might be part of their strategy, Harry realized. Force a confrontation between magical and Muggle authorities to strengthen separatist arguments. Hermione moved closer, leaning against the workbench beside him. The integration work we're doing threatens them because it undermines the foundation of their worldview. If magic and technology can work together, if Muggle and magical societies can collaborate effectively, then their vision of inevitable conflict and necessary separation falls apart, Harry finished. He looked at Hermione, suddenly intensely aware of her proximity. We've been fighting this battle on multiple fronts for years. Sometimes I wonder if we're making any real progress. We are, she insisted, her hand finding his on the workbench. Every successful mission, every new integration we develop, it proves that another way is possible. Harry turned his hand to intertwine their fingers, the gesture feeling both natural and significant. I'm glad you're here, Hermione. Not just for the mission prep. Her brown eyes held his, something unspoken but increasingly undeniable passing between them. I was planning to come earlier anyway. The department approved my transfer request. Transfer? Harry asked, surprised. To S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Magical Research Division. Joint appointment, technically. I'll be the official liaison between the Department of Mysteries and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s integration projects. A smile spread across her face. Which means we'll be working together regularly, not just during holidays and emergencies. That's... Harry searched for words adequate to express his feelings. That's brilliant news. Hermione's smile turned slightly mischievous. I thought you'd approve. Though I expect I'll be seeing more of the workshop than the city for a while. We could change that, Harry suggested, gathering his courage. When I get back from Romania. Dinner, maybe? Somewhere that isn't a laboratory or a briefing room or surrounded by potential explosions. Are you asking me on a date, Harry Potter Stark? Hermione asked, her tone light though her eyes were serious. I think I am, he admitted. Probably should have done it years ago. Probably, she agreed. Then, with characteristic directness, yes. The simple acceptance hung between them, transforming the familiar workshop into something new. Harry found himself leaning closer almost unconsciously, drawn by a gravitational pull that had been building for longer than he'd allowed himself to acknowledge. Hermione met him halfway, her free hand coming to rest lightly on his chest as their lips finally connected in a kiss that felt simultaneously like a new beginning and the natural conclusion to years of growing connection. It was brief but charged with meaning, the culmination of friendship evolving into something deeper through shared purpose and mutual understanding. When they separated, Harry couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. Worth waiting for, he murmured. Indeed, Hermione replied, a slight flush coloring her cheeks though her eyes remained steady on his. Though perhaps not the optimal timing, given you're leaving for a dangerous mission in 6 hours. Or the perfect timing, Harry countered. Extra motivation to come back safely. As if you needed more, she said, squeezing his hand before reluctantly stepping back. We should finish the preparations. They returned to work, the air between them charged with new awareness but their focus professional as ever. The mission remained the priority, but something fundamental had shifted, a potential acknowledged, a future glimpsed beyond the immediate challenges they faced. The S.H.I.E.L.D. transport craft approached Romanian airspace under heavy cloaking technology, both electronic and magical. In the cargo hold, the Avengers team made final preparations, checking equipment and reviewing mission parameters. Harry completed the specialized runic sequences on his armor, the silver-white markings glowing briefly before settling into the midnight blue surface. The Mark VII arcane armor represented the pinnacle of their integration work, a seamless blend of Tony's most advanced suit technology with magical enhancements that Harry had developed through years of research and field experience. Remember, This is reconnaissance, not engagement, Steve reminded the team, securing his shield to his back. We need to know what they're developing before we determine the appropriate response. Unless they're about to launch an attack, Tony pointed out, his own armor standing ready in its deployment configuration. In which case, we shift to prevention protocols. Agreed, but only with confirmation, Steve emphasized. We can't afford an international incident based on speculation. Harry performed a final diagnostic check on his magical detection systems. The facility will have anti-apparition wards and probably port key restrictions. If we need emergency extraction, we'll have to rely on conventional means unless I can temporarily disrupt the magical barriers. Natasha checked her specialized equipment, which included several devices Harry and Tony had developed that could function effectively against magical opponents. Infiltration point confirmed through thermal imaging. Security patterns suggest a 7-minute window on the northwest perimeter. We'll deploy in 2 teams, Steve continued. Romanoff and I will secure the primary data center. Stark and Potter Stark will investigate the high-energy readings in the central chamber. Thor provides distraction if needed and extraction support. I shall remain vigilant above, Thor confirmed, Mjolnir already in hand. Though I look forward to confronting these dishonorable users of magic. Asgard has strict protocols regarding the misuse of mystical energies. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Steve replied. Communications check. Remember, magical interference may disrupt standard channels. We'll rely on Potter Stark's enhanced system if primary comms fail. Final checks complete, the team positioned for deployment. Harry activated his armor, the pieces assembling around him with fluid precision. Inside the helmet, the HUD displayed both technological and magical data in an integrated interface that had become second nature after years of refinement. Approaching drop zone, came the pilot's voice. Deploying in 30 seconds. Harry felt the familiar combination of tension and focus that preceded any mission, but tempered now with years of experience. At 17, he had participated in more field operations than most SHIELD agents, his unique capabilities making him an invaluable asset despite his age. The Ministry of Magic had initially protested his involvement, citing both magical secrecy concerns and child protection laws, but had gradually shifted to grudging acceptance as the threat of magical technological weapons became impossible to ignore. Magical signature scanning activated, Harry reported as his systems came fully online. I'm detecting the expected perimeter wards, but nothing we haven't prepared for. Deployment in 3, 2, 1, the pilot announced. Good hunting. The cargo bay opened to reveal moonlit mountains below, the facility nestled in a valley, its lights minimal to avoid detection. Tony launched first, his armor's repulsors flaring briefly before shifting to stealth mode. Harry followed, the magical components of his suit automatically adjusting to minimize energy signatures that might trigger detection wards. They descended rapidly, Thor following at higher altitude to maintain overview position. Steve and Natasha would deploy via specialized glider units once the aerial team confirmed the landing zone was secure. Harry's magical sensors processed the complex layering of protective enchantments surrounding the facility. Detecting standard anti-muggle wards, apparition restrictions, and something else, perception distortion fields designed to confuse electronic surveillance. That explains why satellite imaging has been inconsistent, Tony noted. They're using magic to essentially create a digital blind spot. Initiating counterward protocols, Harry reported, activating the specialized systems they had developed. His suit emitted a carefully modulated magical field designed to interface with the Romanian-style wards, creating the impression that they belonged within the protected area. The invisible barrier of magical energy rippled as they passed through, but the alarms they had anticipated remained silent. Ward bypass successful, Harry confirmed. Landing zone appears secure. They touched down in a shadowed area near the northwestern perimeter, between sensor arrays identified in their pre-mission analysis. Harry immediately deployed enhanced detection charms, scanning for guards or magical surveillance. Clear, he reported after a moment. Romanoff and Rogers are good to deploy. Minutes later, the full team had assembled and moved toward the main facility. The building appeared unremarkable from the outside, a modern research complex with minimal external security, relying primarily on its remote location and magical protections. Primary entrance has both magical and technological locks, Harry observed as they approached. I'm detecting enchanted identification requirements overlaid with biometric scanning. Can you bypass both? Steve asked. Harry studied the magical signature, comparing it against the countermeasures they had prepared. Yes, but it will temporarily disrupt the ward structure. They'll know something's wrong within 3 minutes of us entering. Then we move fast, Steve decided. Stark, assist with the technological components. Everyone else, prepare for entry. Harry and Tony worked in practice tandem, Harry's magical disruptors interfacing with Tony's electronic countermeasures to create a temporary vulnerability in the facility's security. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a sterile corridor lit with subdued lighting. Splitting into teams now, Steve directed once they were inside. Stay on comms. If you encounter hostile forces, assess before engaging. Harry and Tony moved toward the central section of the facility where energy readings had indicated significant magical activity. Their armor's stealth systems, both technological and magical, kept them undetected as they navigated through research areas containing equipment that combined magical and technological components in increasingly sophisticated configurations. They're further along than we thought, Tony murmured, scanning a laboratory they passed. These integration patterns are approaching our early prototype designs. But with a different emphasis, Harry noted. Our work focused on defensive applications and enhancement. These systems are designed for energy weaponization, extracting and amplifying magical power for destructive purposes. As they approached the central chamber, Harry's magical detection systems registered increasingly powerful readings. Whatever they're containing in there, it's generating massive magical output. The signature is unusual. Define unusual, Tony prompted, his own sensors analyzing the energy patterns. It's not consistent with any single magical creature or artifact I've encountered, Harry explained. It's almost like a composite signature, multiple magical sources being combined somehow. They reached a heavily secured door at the end of a corridor, beyond which their sensors indicated the primary energy source was located. Unlike previous security points, this one featured runic sequences carved directly into metal alloy frames, glowing with palpable magical power. These are serious containment wards, Harry observed, studying the patterns with growing concern. They're designed not just to keep people out, but to keep something in. Can you breach them? Tony asked. Harry analyzed the runic configurations, matching them against his extensive knowledge of magical security systems. Yes, but carefully. A brute force approach could trigger whatever they're containing. He extended his hand, allowing his armor's magical interface to connect with the ward structure. Through years of practice, Harry had developed the ability to manipulate magical energy with exceptional precision, directing it through the technological enhancements of his suit to achieve effects impossible through standard wand work. The runes flickered as Harry systematically identified and neutralized key points in the security matrix. After several tense minutes, the magical barrier dissipated with a faint shimmer, and the physical door unlocked with a soft click. We're in, Harry confirmed. But whatever's inside is magically active. Be ready. They entered a vast chamber dominated by a central containment structure, a cylindrical tank approximately 30 feet high, filled with swirling, luminescent fluid. Suspended within the fluid were what appeared to be organic components, parts of magical creatures preserved in some kind of stasis. What the hell? Tony murmured, sensors analyzing the contents. Those are magical creature parts, Harry confirmed grimly. Dragon heart, phoenix feathers, unicorn horn, basilisk venom sacs. They've harvested components from dozens of magical species. But why keep them in stasis rather than processing them? Tony wondered, approaching the tank cautiously. Harry's attention was drawn to the complex apparatus surrounding the container, a network of runic circuits and technological interfaces that channeled energy from the suspended components into collection systems. They're not just preserving the parts, he realized with dawning horror. They're keeping them magically active, harvesting continuous magical energy without consuming the source material. Like a renewable magical battery, Tony concluded, grasping the implications. These creatures' parts maintain magical properties after harvesting, but normally degrade with use. They've found a way to extract the energy while preventing degradation. It's brilliant and terrible, Harry said, documenting the system with his suit's sensors. This solves the power problem that limited their previous weapons. With this energy source, they could power hundreds of magical technological weapons indefinitely. We need to get this data back to S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony decided. And we need samples of that containment fluid. Whatever they've developed here goes beyond anything we've encountered. As Tony extracted samples using specialized equipment built into his armor, Harry continued analyzing the runic configurations controlling the system. The integration is seamless, he noted with reluctant admiration. Magical and technological components working in perfect harmony to maintain the stasis field while extracting energy. Someone's coming, Tony suddenly warned, his sensors detecting movement in the corridor outside. Multiple signatures approaching rapidly. Before they could retreat, the door burst open to reveal a team of security personnel armed with the advanced magical technological weapons they had anticipated. Leading them was a figure Harry recognized immediately, Lucius Malfoy, his platinum hair unmistakable, a cold smile on his aristocratic face. "Mr. Potter Stark," Malfoy greeted with false cordiality. "And the Elder Stark as well. How considerate of you to save us the trouble of arranging a proper demonstration of our work." "Malfoy," Harry acknowledged, his armor's systems automatically scanning for weaknesses in the opposition's positioning. "Interesting company you're keeping these days. The pureblood supremacist working with Muggle technology. What would your old Death Eater friend say?" "They would recognize adaptation when necessary," Malfoy replied smoothly. "The magical world has remained stagnant for centuries while Muggles have developed increasingly sophisticated tools. Our partnership represents the best of both worlds, magical power enhanced by technological precision." "Partnering with Stain is a dangerous game," Tony commented, subtly shifting into a defensive posture. "He has a history of betraying his allies when they're no longer useful." "A risk I've accounted for," Malfoy assured him. "Now, I'm afraid I must insist you remain as our guests. Mr. Stain is particularly interested in examining your armor designs up close." Harry established the secure magical communication link with the rest of the team, sending a quick alert about their situation. "Not going to happen, Malfoy. We've seen enough to know what you're developing here, and it's going to stop." Malfoy's expression hardened. "I had hoped to avoid unnecessary conflict, but perhaps a demonstration is in order." He gestured to one of his security team, who activated a control panel near the door. The chamber's lighting shifted as secondary systems came online, revealing additional containment tanks around the perimeter that had been concealed by magical camouflage. Each contained what appeared to be modified magical creatures, chimeric combinations with technological components integrated into their bodies. "Our early experiments," Malfoy explained with disturbing pride. "Magical creatures enhanced with technological control systems. The perfect synthesis of natural power and engineered precision." In one tank, a creature resembling a dragon but smaller and oddly proportioned thrashed against its constraints, metallic components visible along its spine and wings. In another, something wolf-like with multiple eyes prowled restlessly, glowing runic patterns embedded in its fur. "You're creating magical weapons," Harry stated, disgust evident in his voice. "We're evolving magical potential," Malfoy corrected. "Something your own work pioneered, though with less vision. Your integration of magic and technology focuses on human enhancement. We've recognized that magical creatures offer far greater raw power to exploit." "Exploit being the operative word," Tony noted. "These creatures didn't volunteer for your experiments. Sentimentality is a weakness neither of us can afford in this new world," Malfoy dismissed. Now, I suggest you surrender peacefully. The containment systems for these specimens are quite sensitive, and any conflict risks their release. I assure you, their conditioning makes them particularly hostile to unauthorized personnel. Harry exchanged a quick glance with Tony, a silent communication born of years working together. Through their secure channel, he received confirmation that Steve and Natasha had acquired the data from the research terminals and were moving to support their position. Interesting offer, Harry replied, buying time. But I think we'll decline. Without warning, he activated one of his suit's specialized functions, a magical disruption pulse designed specifically to interfere with hybrid control systems. The pulse rippled outward, temporarily disabling the security team's weapons and causing fluctuations in the containment field monitors. Now! Tony shouted, immediately firing repulsor blasts at the security personnel while Harry erected a magical shield to deflect their return fire. Chaos erupted as alarms blared throughout the facility. Malfoy retreated behind his security team, drawing a wand from his walking stick. Release Security Protocols 3 and 4, he commanded one of his technicians. Let's see how they handle our prototypes. Two of the containment tanks began draining, their occupants stirring more actively as the fluid receded. Harry focused on neutralizing the armed personnel while monitoring the failing containment systems with growing concern. We've got incoming, he warned Tony. They're releasing the modified creatures. Cap, we need extraction, Tony communicated to the rest of the team. Hostiles are deploying unknown magical technological entities. The first tank opened with a hydraulic hiss, releasing the wolf-like creature. It shook itself, sending droplets of containment fluid spattering across the floor, before fixing its multiple eyes on Harry and Tony. A low growl emanated from its throat, the runic patterns in its fur glowing brighter as technological components along its spine activated. What the hell is that thing? Tony demanded, sensors attempting to analyze the hybrid creature. Looks like a modified direwolf with graphorn DNA, Harry assessed quickly. Magically resistant hide combined with enhanced intelligence. The technological components appear to be some kind of control system. The creature lunged with unnatural speed, its movement patterns suggesting both magical enhancement and technological precision. Harry barely managed to deflect its attack with a shield charm, the force still sending him sliding backward. Its attack patterns are programmed, he realized, analyzing the creature's movements. They've created a magically powerful organism that follows technological direction. The second containment tank opened to release the dragon-like entity, smaller than a true dragon but still impressive with a wingspan of nearly 15 feet. Unlike natural dragons, this creature moved with machine-like precision, its eyes glowing with an artificial light that suggested technological augmentation. We need to neutralize the control systems, Tony suggested, firing a targeted repulsor blast at the direwolf hybrid. The creature absorbed the impact with minimal effect, its magically resistant hide functioning as expected. Agreed, Harry replied, scanning the creatures with his magical detection systems. The integration points are along the spine and at the base of the skull. If we can disrupt those junctions. The dragon hybrid unleashed a burst of flame that combined natural dragon fire with what appeared to be technologically enhanced plasma. The resulting blast melted a section of laboratory equipment into slag almost instantly. Move! Tony shouted, pushing Harry aside as a second blast targeted their position. These things are weaponized for magical technological combat. They're specifically designed to counter our armors. Harry recovered quickly, analyzing the attack pattern. The flame carries a magical signature similar to fiendfire but with technological focusing. Our standard shields won't hold against sustained assault. As if confirming his assessment, the direwolf charged again, this time coordinating with the dragon hybrid in a clearly programmed attack sequence. The wolf targeted Tony's lower body while the dragon prepared another breath weapon attack from above. Harry reacted instinctively, channeling magical energy through his armor in a pattern he had developed specifically for containing magical creatures. A silver-blue field expanded outward, forming a dome-like structure that momentarily confused the creature's targeting systems. Their control implants respond to magical disruption, he noted, observing the creature's momentary disorientation. If we can generate enough magical interference without destroying the facility. On it, Tony confirmed, activating a specialized function in his armor. As a non-magical user, his suit's capabilities differed from Harry's, emphasizing technological solutions to magical problems. In this case, his armor generated precisely modulated energy fields designed to mimic and interfere with specific magical frequencies. The combined disruption from both suits created enough interference to temporarily stun the hybrid creatures, giving them a moment to regroup. Through the comms, they heard Steve's voice, "We're at your position in 30 seconds. Thor is creating a distraction topside." True to his word, the facility shook with the unmistakable impact of Mjolnir, followed by electrical disturbances that suggested Thor was generating substantial lightning. The momentary chaos allowed Harry to focus on the primary threat, Lucius Malfoy, who had used the creature attack as cover to access another control system. "He's activating something else," Harry warned, moving to intercept the wizard. "Malfoy, stop." Malfoy turned with a cold smile, his hand already on a control crystal embedded in a runic array. "Too late, Potter Stark. The primary integration protocol is already initiating. Consider this a preview of what awaits your precious Avengers and the magical world that has so foolishly embraced your Muggle contamination." The central containment tank, the one holding the preserved magical creature components, began to pulse with intensifying energy. The swirling fluid accelerated its movement, the suspended materials drawing closer together as if being compelled into a new configuration. "He's forcing a magical fusion," Harry realized with horror. "The separate components are being integrated into a composite entity." "That's not possible," Tony objected, his sensors analyzing the process. "Even with magical assistance, biological components from different species can't simply merge into a functional organism." "They can with the right catalyst," Malfoy corrected, watching the process with evident satisfaction. "Something your research overlooked in your focus on human applications. Certain magical substances can bridge incompatible biological systems when properly prepared." Inside the tank, the components were indeed merging, dragon heart pulsing as it integrated with phoenix tissue, basilisk venom sacs attaching to newly forming circulatory systems, unicorn horn affixing to a skull taking shape from seemingly nothing. Throughout the horrific fusion, technological components wove themselves into the developing organism, control systems and enhancement devices becoming part of its very structure. "This is insane," Harry said, preparing to intervene. "You're creating an abomination that violates every natural law of both worlds." "I'm creating the future," Malfoy countered. "A being that harnesses the most powerful aspects of magical creatures through technological control. The perfect weapon against those who would dilute magical purity with Muggle influence." Harry directed a precisely calibrated magical disruption at the containment system, attempting to halt the fusion process. The tank's protective fields absorbed his attack, the runic configurations adapting to counter his specific magical signature. "It's keyed against your magical pattern," Malfoy observed with satisfaction. "We've studied your methods extensively, Potter Stark. This facility was designed specifically to counter your particular integration of magic and technology." The door burst open as Steve and Natasha arrived, taking in the situation quickly. "We need to evacuate," Steve assessed immediately. "This entire place is going into some kind of activation sequence. Thermal readings are spiking throughout the facility." "We can't leave that thing to complete its formation," Harry insisted, indicating the tank where the chimeric creation was taking increasingly defined shape. "If it successfully integrates all those magical components under technological control, it becomes the most magically powerful weapon ever created," Tony finished. "With programmed loyalty to Stain and Malfoy." Malfoy backed toward a concealed exit, his security team providing cover. "You have perhaps 3 minutes before the integration completes. I suggest you use that time to flee rather than attempting heroics. Even your combined capabilities cannot contain what is about to emerge." As Malfoy disappeared through the hidden doorway, the facility's systems accelerated their activation sequence. The hybrid dire wolf and dragon, temporarily stunned by their disruption attack, began recovering, their movements becoming more coordinated as the control systems adapted. Options? Steve demanded, shield ready as he assessed the multiple threats. We need to disrupt the integration process, Harry replied, scanning the containment system for vulnerabilities. The runic configurations are warded against standard magical attacks, but they might not account for combined approaches. What are you thinking? Tony asked, recognizing the look of determined calculation on his son's face despite the helmet concealing it. Simultaneous disruption, magical, technological, and physical, Harry explained rapidly. I target the runic matrices controlling the fusion with countermagic, you hit the technological control systems with precisely calibrated EMP, and Thor. He glanced at Steve, who nodded and activated his comm. Thor, we need a precisely targeted lightning strike on the central chamber. Coordinate with Potter Stark for timing. Understood, Captain, came Thor's immediate response. I stand ready. Romanoff and I will handle the hybrid creatures, Steve decided, already moving to engage the recovering dire wolf. Execute your plan quickly. Harry positioned himself directly before the containment tank, analyzing the complex runic sequences controlling the fusion process. Years of studying both traditional and experimental magic had given him an understanding of magical principles that few wizards achieved in lifetimes of study. Combined with Tony's technological mentorship, he had developed magical techniques that transcended conventional limitations. I need 30 seconds to map the complete runic structure, he communicated to Tony, who had moved to a position where he could target the primary technological components. The counterspell needs to precisely invert the fusion catalyst. Working on EMP calibration, Tony replied, his armor systems analyzing the electronic vulnerabilities in the containment apparatus. These control systems have magical shielding. Standard electromagnetic disruption won't penetrate. Focus on frequency modulation, Harry suggested, his magical analysis nearly complete. Match the pulse frequency to the harmonic resonance of the runic configuration. Around them, Steve and Natasha engaged the hybrid creatures with practiced coordination. Natasha deployed specialized equipment designed for magical combat, devices Harry and Tony had developed for shield agents facing magical threats. Steve's shield, with properties that had proven surprisingly effective against magical attacks, served as both offense and defense against the unnaturally fast dire wolf. Ready, Harry announced after completing his analysis. The countermagic will temporarily destabilize the runic protections, creating a window for Thor's lightning to penetrate. Tony, your EMP needs to hit precisely as the magical shields falter. Synchronized timing in 3, 2, 1. Tony counted down. Harry channeled magical energy through his armor's enhancement systems, focusing it into a precisely crafted counterspell that targeted the fundamental principles of the fusion process. Unlike brute force magical attacks, this approach sought to unravel the magic at its foundational level, reversing the catalytic effect Malfoy had initiated. Simultaneously, Tony activated his specialized EMP generator, the pulse modulated to the exact frequency Harry had identified. The combined assault struck the containment system at the moment of Harry's magical disruption, creating a cascading failure in the protective fields. Thor, now! Harry commanded through the communication link. The ceiling above them cracked as a massive lightning bolt penetrated the facility, guided by Mjolnir's magic to strike precisely at the containment tank. The combined magical, technological, and elemental assault overwhelmed the protection systems, shattering the tank in a catastrophic release of energy. The explosion sent everyone flying backward, magical backlash washing through the chamber in waves of disruptive force. Harry's magical shields activated automatically, protecting him from the worst effects, but the sheer power released still momentarily overwhelmed his armor systems. As the chaos subsided, they found the central tank destroyed, its contents reduced to inert material by the precisely coordinated attack. The fusion process had been successfully disrupted, preventing the chimeric creation from completing its formation. Status? Steve demanded, pushing himself to his feet after being thrown against a wall. Containment system neutralized, Harry reported, his magical sensors confirming the threat had been eliminated. The fusion catalyst has been rendered inert. The hybrid creatures are down, Natasha added, indicating where their coordinated attack with Steve had successfully disabled the experimental weapons. Control implants destroyed by the magical backlash. Facility systems are going critical, Tony warned, his sensors detecting cascading failures throughout the complex. The disruption has triggered some kind of self-destruct sequence. Evacuation protocol, Steve ordered immediately. Thor, we need extraction. Already prepared, Thor's voice came through the comms. I have cleared the upper levels. Exit through the primary research corridor. They moved quickly through the failing facility, gathering what data and samples they could secure in the limited time available. Harry maintained magical shields around the team as they navigated through increasingly unstable sections, structural integrity compromised by both Thor's initial distraction and the subsequent containment failure. As they reached the upper levels, they found Thor engaged with remaining security forces. The Asgardian's hammer swept in wide arcs, disabling opponents with calculated force rather than lethal power. The transport is inbound, Steve informed them as they regrouped. ETA 2 minutes. The facility won't last that long, Tony assessed, monitoring the escalating energy readings. Whatever self-destruct sequence Malfoy activated, it's accelerating. I can create a temporary containment field, Harry offered. But maintaining it while we evacuate will be challenging. Do it, Steve directed. We need that transport time. Harry focused his magical energy through the armor's enhancement systems, creating a dome-like shield that expanded outward to encompass their position and stabilize the immediate structural components. Maintaining such a large-scale magical effect required intense concentration, the armor's systems amplifying his natural abilities but still demanding significant personal magical expenditure. 60 seconds to extraction, Natasha reported, maintaining perimeter security. The facility continued deteriorating around them, magical energy interacting with technological systems in increasingly volatile ways. Harry's containment field strained against the building chaos, his armor's diagnostic systems warning of approaching magical exhaustion. Energy spike incoming, Tony suddenly warned, his sensors detecting a massive surge building beneath them. Something big is about to blow. Harry reinforced the containment field, channeling every available ounce of magical power through his armor. The strain was immense, threatening to overwhelm both the technological systems and his personal magical capacity. Transport is here, Steve announced as the shield aircraft appeared overhead, hovering in position for emergency extraction. Everyone move, Tony ordered. Harry, release the containment once we're aboard. The team moved swiftly toward the waiting transport, Harry maintaining the protective field while gradually contracting it to follow their retreat. As they reached the extraction point, the magical strain had reached critical levels, his armor's warnings indicating imminent system failure from the sustained output. Everyone's clear, Steve confirmed once they had boarded. Potter Stark, release and get in now. Harry prepared to disengage the containment field when his sensors detected a final, massive energy surge rushing toward them from the facility's core. In that split second, he made a critical decision. Instead of simply releasing the field and retreating, he redirected his remaining magical energy to create a focused shield between the approaching blast and the transport craft. Go, he shouted to the pilot, maintaining position outside the craft to anchor the protective shield. I'll catch up. Harry, no. Tony moved toward the open bay door, but Thor held him back. He creates the necessary time for our escape, the Asgardian understood. His shield will not hold otherwise. The facility exploded in a blinding flash of combined magical and technological energy. Harry's shield absorbed the initial blast wave, protecting the departing transport, but the force overwhelmed his armor's already taxed systems. The magical backlash sent him tumbling through the air, emergency protocols activating to maintain minimum life support as primary systems failed. Through damaged sensors, Harry was vaguely aware of the transport gaining safe distance, then of a flash of red and gold as Tony, having broken free of Thor's restraint, dove back toward his falling form. His consciousness faded as armored arms encircled him, the last sensation one of being held securely as darkness claimed him. Harry awoke to the familiar antiseptic smell of a medical facility. His body ached with the distinctive fatigue of magical exhaustion, a condition he had experienced with increasing frequency as his abilities and their applications expanded. Opening his eyes required more effort than it should have, but eventually he managed to focus on the ceiling above him, recognizing the design as S.H.I.E.L.D.'s primary medical center. "About time," came Tony's voice from beside the bed. "You've been dramatically unconscious for nearly 18 hours. Very attention-seeking behavior." Harry turned his head to find his father seated nearby, attempting to mask concern with his customary sarcasm. Despite the casual posture, signs of stress were evident in the shadows under Tony's eyes and the tension in his shoulders. "The team?" Harry asked, his voice rough from disuse. "All safe, thanks to your self-sacrificing heroics," Tony replied, offering a cup of water with a straw. "Though Thor maintains he could have deflected the blast with Mjolnir, so you've created an Asgardian honor competition that may never end." Harry sipped the water gratefully. "The armor?" "Severely damaged but reparable. The magical core experienced what Bruce is calling catastrophic resonance collapse, which apparently is bad." Tony leaned forward, dropping the casual act. "You nearly died, Harry. The magical feedback when your shield collapsed could have burned out your entire nervous system." "I calculated the risks," Harry defended weakly. "The transport wouldn't have cleared the blast radius otherwise." "Calculated the," Tony broke off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You sound exactly like me, and that's terrifying because I know what a self-destructive idiot I can be." Before Harry could respond, the door opened to admit Hermione, who had evidently been notified of his awakening. Her expression shifted rapidly from worry to relief to barely contained anger as she approached the bed. "You absolute idiot," she greeted him, confirming Tony's assessment of his behavior. "Do you have any idea what that kind of magical overextension could have done to you? Your core was depleted to dangerous levels." "Hello to you too," Harry replied with a weak smile. "I'm fine, thanks for asking." "You're not fine," she countered, though her hand found his on the bed, contradicting her harsh tone with gentle contact. "You're suffering from severe magical exhaustion, neural pathway strain, and what magical medical texts describe as core shock." "Which apparently isn't an appropriate name for a breakfast cereal," Tony interjected. "I asked." Hermione ignored him, focusing on Harry. "The healers from St. Mungo's that S.H.I.E.L.D. consulted said you need at least a week of complete magical rest. No spell work, no armor interfacing, nothing that draws on your magical core until it stabilizes." Harry nodded, recognizing from experience that arguing would be pointless. "What about the mission data? Did we get everything we needed?" "And more," Tony confirmed, returning to business now that the obligatory scolding had been delivered. "The samples and information we recovered have given us unprecedented insight into what Stain and Malfoy are developing. Fury's got analysts working around the clock to process everything. The magical technological integration they've achieved with creature components is revolutionary," Hermione admitted reluctantly. "Horrific in its application, but the theoretical foundation could transform healing magic if applied ethically." "And the hybrid creatures?" Harry asked. "Neutralized during the facility collapse," Tony answered. "Though based on the research data, they were just prototypes. Early experiments leading to whatever they were attempting with that fusion process you interrupted." Speaking of which, a new voice joined the conversation as Nick Fury entered the room. "That interruption has earned you quite a bit of attention, Potter Stark. Both wanted and unwanted." "Director," Harry acknowledged, attempting to sit up straighter despite protesting muscles. Hermione immediately assisted, adjusting his pillows with practiced efficiency. "The magical diplomatic channels are buzzing," Fury informed them, moving to stand at the foot of the bed. "Your direct confrontation with Lucius Malfoy, a prominent member of magical society, during a S.H.I.E.L.D. operation has created what the British Ministry of Magic is calling an unprecedented jurisdictional crisis. They can't seriously be defending Malfoy," Harry objected. He was creating magical weapons of mass destruction. They're not defending his actions, Fury clarified. They're objecting to the fact that a joint SHIELD Avengers team conducted an unsanctioned operation against a wizard on foreign soil without involving the appropriate magical authorities. Politics, Tony summarized with disgust. Unfortunately, yes, Fury agreed. However, the evidence we recovered is substantial enough that even the most traditional elements in their government can't ignore it. The International Confederation of Wizards has launched its own investigation based on our findings. And Malfoy? Hermione asked. In the wind, Fury replied. Along with Stain. They evacuated before the facility collapsed. SHIELD has monitoring protocols active worldwide, but they've gone deep underground. Harry absorbed this information with growing concern. If they escaped with their research intact, then they're likely already working on rebuilding their program elsewhere, Fury completed the thought. Which is why your recovery needs to be expedited as much as medically possible. The next confrontation will be significantly more challenging. The armor needs extensive rebuilding, Tony pointed out. The magical core was completely destabilized. We're essentially starting from scratch with the integration components. Then I suggest you get started, Fury replied. Because our intelligence suggests Stain has accelerated his timeline. Whatever they're planning, we believe they're moving toward deployment rather than continued development. After Fury departed, a heavy silence settled over the room. The implications of what they had discovered in Romania, and what might be developing elsewhere, weighed on all of them. We need to rethink our approach, Harry said finally. The Mark 7 was designed primarily for enhancement and controlled application of magical energy. Against what they're developing, we need something more specifically countered to hybrid magical biological threats. Already started the calculations, Tony assured him. But you heard the magical medical mumbo-jumbo. 1 week of recovery before you even think about touching magical technology. I can still contribute to the design phase, Harry insisted. And Hermione's expertise in magical creature properties will be essential for developing effective countermeasures. I've been granted temporary clearance to access all SHIELD research facilities, Hermione confirmed. And the Department of Mysteries has authorized sharing restricted information regarding magical creature containment protocols. Look at that, Tony remarked with forced lightness. International magical muggle cooperation in the face of a common threat. Almost makes the near-death experience worthwhile. Harry smiled weakly, recognizing his father's attempt to maintain normalcy despite the gravity of their situation. Almost, but not quite. As Tony left to begin preliminary work on the armor redesign, Hermione remained beside Harry's bed, her hands still entwined with his. You really did scare us, she said quietly once they were alone. The magical readings when they brought you in. I've never seen exhaustion that severe outside of historical cases. I'm sorry, Harry replied sincerely. In the moment, it seemed like the only option. It's who you are, she acknowledged with a mixture of exasperation and affection. Always putting others' safety above your own. It's admirable and incredibly frustrating simultaneously. Part of my charm, he suggested with a tentative smile. Among other qualities, she conceded, her expression softening. After a brief hesitation, she leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. But I'd appreciate if you try to stay alive long enough for that dinner you promised me. Definitely a priority, Harry assured her, warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with magical recovery. Though I'm not sure hospital food counts. It does not, she stated definitively. And I'll hold you to a proper date once you're recovered. Her expression grew more serious. But first, we need to prepare for whatever Stain and Malfoy are planning. The magical signature from that fusion attempt. Harry, I've been researching similar phenomena, and every historical precedent suggests catastrophic consequences when such experiments progress to completion. Harry nodded, sobering. Whatever they're building, it's designed specifically to counter the integration work we've pioneered. They're creating weapons that can target both magical and technological vulnerabilities simultaneously. Which means our response needs to be equally comprehensive, Hermione concluded. Not just improved armor, but a strategic approach that addresses both aspects of the threat. A full Avengers response, Harry agreed. Magical and Muggle cooperation at an unprecedented level. As they began discussing preliminary concepts for countering the hybrid threats they had discovered, Harry reflected on how far they had come from their early experiments in Tony's workshop. What had begun as a curious boy's attempt to understand his dual heritage had evolved into a critical defense against threats that neither world fully understood alone. The coming confrontation would test not just their technological and magical capabilities, but the very foundations of the integration they had pioneered, and Harry's unique position as the bridge between worlds had never felt more significant or more challenging. 3 weeks later, Harry stood in the newly redesigned Avengers training facility, observing as Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff practiced combat maneuvers against magically enhanced training drones. The specialized equipment incorporated elements of both technological precision and magical unpredictability, forcing the agents to adapt to threats that didn't follow conventional physics or tactical patterns. Their response time has improved by 23%, Hermione noted, monitoring data on a specialized tablet beside him. The magical awareness training is showing results. Harry nodded, pleased with the progress. Since the Romania mission, they had implemented comprehensive magical combat preparation for all Avengers team members, a program he had designed based on both his Hogwarts education and field experience. Even those without innate magical ability could learn to recognize and respond to magical threats with appropriate training and equipment. Captain Rogers has a natural aptitude for adapting to magical attack patterns, Harry observed as Steve instinctively positioned his shield to deflect a spell-like energy burst from one of the drones. His tactical mind seems to intuit magical principles despite having no formal training. The serum may enhance his neural processing in ways that facilitate magical perception, Hermione theorized. Dr. Banner has been researching connections between enhanced physiology and magical sensitivity. Their discussion was interrupted by Tony's arrival, his expression animated with the particular energy that signaled a breakthrough. It works, he announced without preamble. The new core integration stabilized at 112% efficiency during the final test cycle. Harry straightened, immediately alert. The magical harmonic issue? Resolved by implementing Hermione's modified arithmetic equations, Tony confirmed. The resonance pattern maintains stability even during high-output sequences. After weeks of intensive redesign and testing, the new armor was approaching completion, a completely reimagined version designated the Arcane Aegis. Unlike previous iterations that focused primarily on enhancing Harry's natural magical abilities, this version had been specifically engineered to counter the hybrid magical technological threats they had encountered in Romania. What about the creature-specific countermeasures? Harry asked, following Tony toward the secure workshop where the armor was housed. Completed and integrated, Tony replied as they walked. Specialized containment fields modulated to the specific magical signatures of 27 magical creatures, plus a general adaptive field for unknown combinations. The secure workshop was a marvel of integrated design, part traditional Stark laboratory, part magical research facility. Runic arrays were embedded in the very architecture, creating an environment where magical and technological development could occur simultaneously without interference. At the center stood the partially assembled Arcane Aegis, its midnight blue surface inscribed with silver-white runic patterns more complex and numerous than any previous version. "It's beautiful," Harry commented, approaching the armor reverently. After his recovery from magical exhaustion, he had contributed extensively to the theoretical design but had limited his direct magical involvement as recommended by the healers. "And deadly effective, according to simulations," Tony added. The response time against hybrid magical signatures exceeds the Mark 7 by 43%, with energy efficiency improved by nearly 60%. Hermione circled the armor, examining the runic configurations with expert assessment. The integration of protective and offensive arrays is seamless. "I've never seen such complex magical engineering outside theoretical texts." That's because no one's ever had a reason to develop it before, Harry pointed out. Traditional magical combat assumes certain conventions that these hybrid threats completely ignore. Their collaborative development process had pushed boundaries in both magical and technological fields. Hermione's expertise in magical theory, particularly regarding creature properties and arithmetic principles, had provided the theoretical foundation. Tony's engineering genius had created technological systems capable of interfacing with magic at unprecedented levels. Harry's unique perspective, straddling both worlds with intuitive understanding, had bridged these approaches into a cohesive whole. When can we test the full integration? Harry asked, eager to experience the completed system. Tomorrow, assuming final calibrations proceed as expected, Tony answered. Bruce wants to monitor your magical core output during the initial synchronization to ensure there's no residual damage from Romania. Harry nodded, accepting the precaution despite his impatience. The threat they faced demanded their best work, not hasty deployment. Intelligence from both S.H.I.E.L.D. and magical sources confirmed their worst fears. Stain and Malfoy had established a new operation, location still unknown, and were proceeding with development of hybrid weapons at an accelerated pace. Sir, Jarvis interrupted, Director Fury is requesting an immediate conference. Priority Alpha. They exchanged concerned glances. Priority Alpha protocols were reserved for imminent threats requiring immediate Avengers response. Put him through, Tony directed, activating the workshop's secure communication array. Fury's image appeared on the main display, his expression grave. We've got confirmation of hybrid weapon deployment. New York, multiple locations, simultaneous attacks. Energy signatures match what we encountered in Romania but significantly amplified. Harry felt a cold sensation settle in his stomach. They're making their move. Multiple casualties already reported, Fury continued. Local authorities are completely outmatched. These weapons are specifically targeting infrastructure and communication systems. The pattern suggests they're attempting to isolate Manhattan. How long until the Aegis is deployment ready? Harry asked Tony urgently. Tony hesitated, calculating rapidly. Full integration would take another 24 hours for optimal performance. We could have basic functionality in 4 to 6 hours, but with significantly reduced capability. We don't have 4 hours, Fury cut in. Whatever Stain and Malfoy are deploying, it's happening now. We need every available asset in the field immediately. Harry made a quick decision. The Mark 7 backup. It's not fully repaired from Romania, but the essential systems are functional. At approximately 62% capacity, Jarvis confirmed. Primary magical interface operational but with reduced output tolerance. Extended deployment would risk system failure. It's better than nothing, Harry determined. Prep it for immediate deployment. Harry, Hermione objected, concern evident in her voice. Your magical core has barely recovered. Using a damaged suit could create feedback loops that might cause permanent injury. She's right, Tony agreed, uncharacteristically aligned with the cautious approach. The backup wasn't designed to protect against magical strain like the Aegis is. People are dying, Harry replied simply. I can't sit here waiting for perfect equipment while New York is under attack. The determination in his voice ended further debate. Tony nodded reluctantly. Jarvis, prepare the Mark 7 for emergency deployment. Activate all available safety protocols and core stabilization measures. Already in progress, sir. As the backup armor was prepared, the workshop became a flurry of activity. Tony issued rapid instructions to Jarvis regarding last-minute modifications to improve safety margins. Hermione worked quickly to inscribe additional protective runes on key components, her wand moving in precise patterns as she reinforced vulnerable systems. The team is assembling on the helipad, Fury informed them. Thor and Banner are already en route to the primary attack zones. Rogers and Romanoff are coordinating with local authorities to establish containment perimeters. We'll join them in 10 minutes, Tony confirmed, already summoning his own latest armor with a gesture. Have medical teams standing by with both conventional and magical trauma capabilities. As the Mark 7 assembled around him piece by piece, Harry felt the familiar connection of the magical interface syncing with his core, but with a concerning difference. Where the integration had previously felt seamless and natural, now he detected resistance, small discordances in the magical flow patterns that indicated the damage the system had sustained in Romania. The magical synchronization is at 58%, Jarvis reported. Below recommended minimum for field deployment. It will have to do, Harry replied, testing the armor's basic functions with careful movements. The response was sluggish compared to optimal performance, but still functional. Run emergency protocols in background mode and maintain continuous monitoring of magical core stress levels. Hermione approached as the final components locked into place, her expression a mixture of professional assessment and personal concern. I've added stabilization runes to the primary interface junction points. They should help buffer any feedback surges, but they're a temporary measure at best. Thank you, Harry said, his helmet still retracted to allow face-to-face communication. I know this isn't ideal. Nothing about this situation is ideal, she replied with grim acceptance. Just promise me you'll withdraw if the magical strain approaches critical levels. No heroic last stands. I promise to be as cautious as the situation allows, he offered, knowing better than to make guarantees he might not be able to keep. Hermione recognized the careful wording but nodded anyway, understanding the realities they faced. After a moment's hesitation, she reached up to press a quick kiss to his lips. Come back in one piece. We still have that dinner date pending. Definitely worth returning for, he assured her with a smile that belied his concern about the coming confrontation. If you two are finished with the pre-battle romance, Tony interrupted, his own armor fully assembled except for the helmet, we have a city to save and some magically enhanced terrorists to stop. Minutes later, they were airborne, flying toward Manhattan where plumes of smoke already rose from multiple locations. Through the Avengers communication network, they received continuous updates on the developing situation. The attacks followed a strategic pattern, targeting key infrastructure and creating corridors of destruction that effectively divided the city into isolated sections. They're implementing a containment strategy, Steve assessed over the comms. Creating barriers of destruction to control movement within the city. But containing it for what purpose? Thor questioned, his voice accompanied by the sound of thunder as he engaged hostiles in the financial district. That's what concerns me, Tony replied as they approached the city skyline. This doesn't feel like a straightforward attack. It's preparation for something else. Harry's magical sensors detected the hybrid energy signatures before visual confirmation, his HUD highlighting concentrations of the distinctive magical technological pattern they had first encountered in Boston and later in Romania. Multiple signatures detected, he reported. At least 17 distinct sources, all emitting hybrid energy profiles consistent with Stain Malfoy technology. What are we looking at exactly? Natasha asked from her position coordinating ground response. Weapon platforms. Enhanced individuals. Both, plus something new, Harry answered as his sensors refined their analysis. The weapon signatures match what we saw in Romania, but there's a central energy source somewhere in the city that's different. Massively powerful and growing stronger. Location. Fury demanded. Working on it, Harry replied, directing his armor's enhanced magical detection systems toward isolating the unusual signature. The magical interference is making precise location difficult, but it appears to be somewhere near Central Park. Banner, head to the park and begin preliminary assessment, Steve directed. Thor, continue containment in the financial district. Stark and Potter Stark, engage the weapon platforms in Midtown. Romanoff and I will handle evacuation coordination and secure a path for emergency services. As they approached Midtown, the nature of the attack became clearer. Hybrid weapon platforms, similar to the gauntlets they had encountered previously but larger and mounted on mobile platforms, were being operated by figures in tactical gear enhanced with magical protections. Each platform emitted destructive energy bursts that combined magical and technological properties, creating damage that resisted both conventional and magical containment efforts. "They've solved the stability issues," Tony noted grimly as they observed the weapons in action. "These aren't prototypes anymore, they're finished products with significant output capacity. And the operators appear to have enhanced protection against magical countermeasures," Harry added, his sensors detecting layered defensive enchantments around each tactical team. "They've anticipated our response. They engaged the nearest weapon platform, coordinating their approach to target different vulnerabilities." Tony focused on the technological components, his repulsors calibrated to disrupt the electronic control systems. Harry targeted the magical elements, using precisely modulated countercharms to neutralize the enhancement effects. The engagement immediately revealed the limitations of Harry's damaged armor. While his magical countermeasures were effective, the interface strained to channel the necessary power, creating fluctuations that reduced precision and increased core stress. "Magical core strain at 42%, Jarvis warned after Harry successfully disabled one platform's enchantments. "Continued output at current levels will exceed safe parameters within approximately 12 minutes. "Noted," Harry acknowledged, already moving toward the next target. "Modulate output to extend operational time. Priority on effectiveness over efficiency." As they progressed through Midtown, neutralizing weapon platforms and containing the destruction, Harry became increasingly concerned about the central energy source his sensors continued to detect. The signature was growing stronger and more defined, suggesting some kind of charging or activation sequence. "Banner, what's your assessment of the park situation?" he inquired through the comm system. "Definitely the epicenter of whatever they're planning," Bruce replied, his voice tense with controlled urgency. "There's a large-scale apparatus being assembled near the Great Lawn. Heavily guarded by both conventional forces and what appear to be wizards in traditional robes. Malfoy," Harry concluded. "He's personally overseeing whatever they're deploying." "And Stain," Tony added, his sensors picking up additional information as they neutralized another platform. Facial recognition just confirmed his presence at the park location. This is their endgame. As they continued their engagement in Midtown, the situation evolved rapidly. The weapon platforms, while destructive, increasingly appeared to be primarily diversionary, drawing Avengers' resources away from the central operation in the park while creating chaos that hampered coordinated response. "We need to shift priority to the central apparatus," Harry decided after disabling a fourth platform. "These attacks are a distraction from their main objective." "Agreed," Steve concurred over the comms. "Romanoff and I have established evacuation corridors with local authorities. We'll redirect to the park as soon as possible." "Thor, status?" "The financial district assailants retreat," Thor reported. "I believe they have accomplished their purpose in creating sufficient destruction to prevent easy approach to the central area of the island." "It's a channeling strategy," Harry realized with growing alarm. "They're creating magical technological barriers around a central point, establishing a controlled environment for whatever they're activating." "A containment field," Tony translated. "But containing what?" The answer came moments later as Bruce's voice returned, now tight with urgency. "They've got something in a specialized transport container. It's pulsing with energy. Matches the fusion experiment signature from Romania but significantly more developed." "They completed the fusion," Harry concluded with horror. "The chimeric entity combining multiple magical creature components, they've successfully created it. And they're about to deploy it in the middle of Manhattan," Tony added grimly. They altered course immediately, heading directly toward Central Park. As they approached, Harry's sensors provided increasingly detailed information about what awaited them. The central apparatus Bruce had identified was a complex magical technological structure, a containment and control system designed to harness and direct the power of whatever lay within the transport container. "I'm detecting massive magical energy buildup," Harry reported. "Whatever they've created, it's preparing to activate. Can you disrupt it?" Steve asked as he and Natasha converged on the park from a different approach vector. Harry analyzed the energy patterns, comparing them to what they had encountered in Romania. Possibly, but it would require direct access to the control matrix. These signatures suggest multiple redundant systems with both magical and technological failsafes. Then that's our primary objective, Steve decided. Thor and Banner will engage defensive forces and create an opening. Stark and Potter Stark will target the control systems directly while Romanoff and I secure the perimeter against reinforcements. As they neared the park, they could see the operation clearly, a circular array of technological equipment combined with what appeared to be runic inscriptions carved directly into the ground, creating a massive integrated system. At the center stood an elevated platform where the transport container was being connected to control interfaces. Lucius Malfoy and Ezekiel Stain stood nearby, overseeing the final preparations. "I have visual confirmation on primary targets," Natasha reported from her advanced position. Malfoy appears to be conducting some kind of ritual component while Stain manages technological integration. "Whatever they're doing, we need to stop it now," Tony urged. "That container is reaching critical energy levels." They initiated their coordinated assault, Thor creating a dramatic entrance with targeted lightning that disabled perimeter defenses without damaging the central apparatus. Bruce, now transformed into the Hulk, engaged the conventional security forces while Steve and Natasha established a controlled perimeter, preventing reinforcements from approaching. Harry and Tony aimed directly for the central platform, their approach immediately detected by both Malfoy and Stain. Defensive systems activated automatically, hybrid weapons similar to those deployed throughout the city, but larger and evidently more powerful. "Incoming!" Tony warned as energy blasts erupted toward them. "Pattern suggests automated targeting based on our specific signatures." Harry erected magical shields, the strain immediately registering in his armor systems as the damaged interface struggled to channel sufficient power. "They've programmed their defenses specifically for us," he noted, recognizing the precise countermeasures targeting his magical signature. They evaded the initial barrage and pressed forward, each targeting specific components of the defensive system. Tony's repulsors disabled technological elements while Harry focused on neutralizing magical protections. Their years of coordinated training showed in their seamless approach, father and son operating as a perfect team despite the less-than-optimal equipment conditions. As they neared the central platform, Stain himself engaged them, wearing what appeared to be a more streamlined version of the gauntlet weapons they had encountered previously. "Stark," he called with mock cordiality. Just in time to witness the culmination of true innovation. "Your son's magical insights combined with my superior engineering vision. Stealing research and perverting its purpose isn't innovation, Stain," Tony replied, maneuvering to flank the platform. "It's just crime with a fancy vocabulary." Harry targeted the control interfaces connecting to the transport container, his magical sensors analyzing vulnerabilities in the system. "The container is magnifying magical energy from whatever's inside it," he reported through the team comm. "It's acting as an amplifier, not just containment." "Can you disrupt the connection?" Steve asked, deflecting attacks from security forces with his shield. "Working on it," Harry replied, directing precisely calibrated magical disruption at key junction points in the apparatus. Malfoy noticed his efforts and moved to counter them, his wand work creating protective barriers around critical components. "Potter Stark," he acknowledged with cold disdain. "Still interfering in matters beyond your understanding, I see. Some things never change, regardless of what name you adopt." "I understand enough to know you're violating fundamental magical laws," Harry responded, maintaining his focus on the technical task while engaging Malfoy verbally. "Creating chimeric magical entities through forced fusion is forbidden by international magical convention for very good reasons. Conventions written by those lacking vision," Malfoy dismissed. "Just as the statute of secrecy was established by wizards too fearful to recognize the potential of proper integration." "Proper integration?" Harry challenged, continuing his systematic attack on the control systems while keeping Malfoy distracted. "You've spent your entire life advocating magical isolation and purity. Now suddenly you're pro-integration." "I advocate for magical dominance," Malfoy corrected coldly. Technology offers tools that can extend magical power in ways our ancestors never imagined. Why should we reject such advantages out of outdated traditionalism? Meanwhile, Tony engaged Stain directly, their armored forms clashing above the platform in a battle of technological precision. Stain's equipment, while less sophisticated than Tony's full armor, incorporated magical enhancements that created unexpected advantages, shields that absorbed conventional repulsor energy, targeting systems that predicted movement with unnatural accuracy. "You always were short-sighted, Tony," Stain taunted as he evaded an attack sequence. "Focusing on individual armors when the real potential lies in mass deployment. My weapons will revolutionize warfare by giving ordinary soldiers access to magical power. At the cost of exploiting magical creatures and destabilizing the separation that's kept both worlds safer," Tony countered, his tactical systems analyzing Stain's equipment for vulnerabilities. "You're creating weapons that neither world is prepared to contain if they proliferate." The battle intensified as both sides escalated their efforts. Thor joined Harry in targeting the central apparatus, his lightning providing additional disruption to the integrated systems. The Hulk maintained perimeter control, preventing additional forces from reinforcing Malfoy and Stain's position. Steve and Natasha engaged in precision strikes against key defensive positions, gradually creating openings in the security perimeter. Harry's focus remained on the container itself, his magical senses providing increasingly alarming information about its contents. "Whatever they've created is becoming more active," he reported urgently. "The magical signature is changing, becoming more organized and purposeful." "They're not just containing it," Tony realized, momentarily disengaging from Stain to scan the apparatus with his armor's sensors. "They're communicating with it, establishing control parameters." "A magical technological neural interface," Harry confirmed, the pieces clicking into place. "Similar to our armor control systems but adapted for a biological entity. They're creating a weapon that combines the most powerful aspects of magical creatures under technological direction." The container pulsed with increasing energy, the ground beneath the platform trembling with each surge. Malfoy and Stain exchanged satisfied glances, their confidence suggesting the process was proceeding as planned despite the Avengers' intervention. "You're too late," Malfoy declared, his wandwork shifting from defense to a complex sequence Harry recognized as the final stages of an activation ritual. "The integration is achieving consciousness. Soon it will recognize its purpose and its masters." "Integration?" Harry questioned, continuing his efforts to disrupt the control matrix. "A rather prosaic name for a revolutionary entity," Stain acknowledged with a shrug. "But accurate. It integrates the most powerful aspects of magical creatures with technological control systems, the perfect synthesis of our respective worlds." The container's pulsing reached a critical frequency, magical energy visibly radiating through seams in its structure. Harry redoubled his efforts, channeling maximum power through his damaged armor despite the warnings flashing across his HUD indicating dangerous strain levels. "Magical core approaching critical stress," Jarvis warned. "Interface stability compromised. Recommend immediate power reduction." "Not an option," Harry replied grimly, maintaining his focus on the increasingly difficult task of disrupting the activation sequence. The damaged armor strained under the magical load, components overheating as the integration system struggled to manage the power flowing through them. Tony, observing Harry's situation through shared data links, disengaged from Stain to provide support. "Your suit's failing," he warned, positioning himself to target secondary control systems and reduce the load on Harry's efforts. "Pull back and let me handle this part." "No time," Harry replied, recognizing that the activation sequence had reached a critical stage. "If that container opens with the control matrix intact, whatever's inside will be fully linked to their command systems. We have one chance to disrupt the integration before it completes." Making a split-second decision, Harry redirected all his armor's remaining power to a focused magical countermeasure, a disruption field specifically designed to sever the connections between the control matrix and the entity within the container. The strain on his damaged systems immediately reached critical levels, warning indicators flashing across his HUD as magical feedback threatened to overwhelm both the armor and his personal magical core. "Harry, stop!" Tony shouted, recognizing the dangerous overload building in his son's armor. "You'll burn out the entire system, and yourself with it." But Harry maintained his focus, channeling every ounce of available power into the disruption field. Years of magical training combined with technological precision allowed him to target the exact frequencies required to interfere with the integration process. The container shuddered as conflicting energies battled for control, the activation sequence faltering under Harry's sustained attack. Malfoy recognized the threat and redirected his efforts, his wand movements becoming increasingly desperate as he attempted to counter Harry's disruption. "Stop him," he commanded Stain. "He's interfering with the neural linkage." Stain immediately shifted his attack toward Harry, firing a concentrated blast from his enhanced weapons. Tony intercepted the attack, his armor absorbing the impact that would have broken Harry's concentration at a critical moment. "Keep going," Tony encouraged, positioning himself as a shield between Harry and their opponents. "I've got you covered." The combined efforts of the Avengers team created the opportunity Harry needed. Thor's lightning disabled secondary power systems, Steve and Natasha neutralized remaining security forces, and the Hulk provided a physical barrier against reinforcements. With Tony protecting him from direct attack, Harry maintained the disruption field at maximum intensity despite the catastrophic strain on his armor systems. "Interface failure imminent," Jarvis warned, the AI's voice distorted by deteriorating systems. "Magical feedback approaching irreversible damage threshold." Harry ignored the warnings, pushing beyond safety limits as he sensed the disruption taking effect. The container's pulsing became erratic, the organized patterns of the activation sequence dissolving into chaotic energy fluctuations. Malfoy's expression shifted from confidence to alarm as control indicators on the apparatus began failing in sequence. "It's working," Harry reported through gritted teeth, the physical strain of channeling such power through damaged systems creating intense pain throughout his body. "The neural linkage is breaking down." Suddenly, the container erupted with uncontrolled energy, the disruption having successfully prevented complete activation but triggering a catastrophic release of the contained power. The explosion sent everyone nearby flying backward, a wave of hybrid magical technological force expanding outward from the platform. Harry's damaged armor absorbed the initial blast but failed completely in the aftermath, systems overloading and shutting down in rapid succession. He fell from the air, the flight systems no longer functional, magical energy arcing across the armor's surface as the integration matrix collapsed. Tony dove to catch him, his own armor damaged but still operational. "Harry!" he called urgently, lowering them both to the ground a safe distance from the now destroyed platform. "System status." No response came from Harry's armor, the magical overload having fried communication systems along with most other functions. Tony manually disengaged the emergency releases, the armor pieces separating to reveal Harry unconscious inside, blood trailing from his nose and ears, signs of severe magical backlash. "I need medical here now." Tony shouted through the team comm, "Potter Stark is down with critical magical injuries." As emergency protocols activated and the team regrouped, the remains of the container lay in twisted ruin at the center of the platform. Whatever had been inside was no longer visible, apparently destroyed or dispersed in the explosion. Malfoy and Stain had disappeared in the chaos, likely having used the distraction of the explosion to escape. The immediate threat neutralized, Tony focused entirely on Harry's condition. The medical response team that arrived included both conventional shield medics and magical healers from the covert division that handled integration cases. Their assessment was grim but not hopeless. Severe magical exhaustion compounded by feedback damage from the armor failure, the lead healer reported after initial evaluation. "His core is destabilized but intact. With proper treatment, recovery is possible." "Do whatever it takes," Tony directed, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Whatever resources you need, whatever specialists, price is no object." As they prepared Harry for emergency transport to the specialized medical facility equipped for hybrid magical technological injuries, the rest of the team secured the site. Initial analysis confirmed that the activation sequence had been successfully disrupted, preventing whatever entity Malfoy and Stain had created from achieving full functionality. The containment field collapsed completely, Bruce reported after returning to human form and examining the wreckage. Based on residual energy signatures, the fusion entity was critically destabilized when the neural linkage failed. Did we destroy it? Steve asked, helping coordinate the secure removal of remaining technological components. Difficult to determine conclusively, Bruce admitted. The explosion dispersed substantial energy, but without a stable form to maintain cohesion, the entity should have been unable to survive intact. Should have been? Tony questioned sharply, still hovering protectively near the medical team treating Harry. These are uncharted territories, Bruce reminded him. We've never encountered anything quite like what they were attempting to create. All I can say with certainty is that the immediate threat has been neutralized. And Malfoy and Stain? Natasha inquired, returning from a perimeter sweep. No sign of either, Thor reported. They appear to have utilized magical means of escape during the confusion. Which means they'll try again, Tony concluded grimly, watching as Harry was loaded into the specialized medical transport. This wasn't their endgame, it was a prototype deployment. They're testing capabilities and our responses. We'll find them, Steve assured him. For now, go with Harry. The team will handle the situation here. Tony nodded gratefully, climbing into the transport alongside the medical team. As the doors closed and the vehicle departed, sirens wailing, he looked down at his son's pale face, equipment already attached to monitor both conventional vital signs and magical core activity. You did it, kid, he said softly, taking Harry's hand. You stopped them. Now you just need to come back to us so we can finish this together. In that moment, Tony Stark, genius, billionaire, superhero, felt the full weight of parenthood more acutely than ever before. The armor that had allowed Harry to save countless lives had also nearly taken his, the very integration they had pioneered together proving both miraculous and potentially devastating. Yet as the transport sped toward the medical facility, one certainty remained clear: the battle between integrated approaches represented by the Avengers and the weaponized perversion Stain and Malfoy pursued was far from over. It had merely entered a new phase, one that would ultimately determine which vision of magical technological integration would shape the future of both worlds. Consciousness returned to Harry in fragments, disconnected sensations and sounds gradually coalescing into coherent awareness. The antiseptic smell of a medical facility. The soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Voices speaking quietly nearby. And beneath it all, an unusual sensation within himself, his magical core, normally a steady presence, feeling somehow different, more raw, more sensitive, yet paradoxically more substantial. He opened his eyes slowly, vision blurry without his glasses, to find himself in what appeared to be a specialized medical room. The walls were inscribed with subtle runic patterns that he recognized as healing and stability enchantments. Monitoring equipment combined magical and technological components, displaying both conventional vital signs and magical energy readings. "Welcome back to the land of the living," came Hermione's voice from beside the bed. She moved into his field of vision, placing his glasses carefully on his face. "You've been unconscious for nearly 4 days." Harry blinked as the world came into focus, taking in Hermione's appearance, tired eyes with dark circles beneath them suggesting minimal sleep, hair pulled back in a practical bun with several strands escaping, clothing wrinkled as if she had been in the same outfit for too long. "You look terrible," he observed, his voice rough from disuse. "Charming as ever," she replied with a smile that belied her exhausted appearance. Especially coming from someone who nearly burnt out his entire magical core by channeling impossible amounts of power through a damaged suit. Memory returned in a rush, the battle in Central Park, the container, the desperate attempt to disrupt the activation sequence. "Did it work?" he asked urgently. "Did we stop it?" "The activation failed and the containment system was destroyed," she confirmed. Whatever they created was never successfully integrated with their control matrix, thanks to your recklessly heroic intervention. Harry relaxed slightly, though the gravity in her expression suggested complications remained. But, he prompted. But Malfoy and Stain escaped, she continued. And while the primary entity was destabilized in the explosion, we can't confirm it was completely destroyed. Some energy readings suggest dispersal rather than destruction. Meaning they could potentially recollect it, Harry concluded grimly. Where's Dad? Getting coffee. He's barely left your side for 4 days, we finally convinced him to take a short break about 20 minutes ago. She took Harry's hand, her expression softening. You scared us, Harry. The healers weren't sure if your magical core would recover from that level of strain. But it has, he questioned, focusing inward on the unusual sensations he had noticed upon waking. Yes and no, came a new voice as Tony entered the room, coffee cup in hand, stubble on his face suggesting minimal attention to personal grooming during Harry's unconsciousness. It's recovered, but it's changed. Changed how? Harry asked, noting the cautious way both Tony and Hermione were watching him. The massive energy channeling combined with the feedback from the suit's failure created what the magical medical experts are calling a core evolution, Hermione explained carefully. Your natural magical capacity has significantly increased, but with altered properties. Layman's terms, you leveled up magically, but with a different skill tree, Tony simplified, setting down his coffee and moving to Harry's bedside. They've been monitoring your core pattern since you were brought in. The baseline magical signature is approximately 40% more powerful than before, but with harmonic variations that don't match standard wizarding patterns. Harry considered this information, focusing again on the internal sensations that had seemed unusual upon waking. His magical core had always felt like a steady presence within him, a reservoir of energy that responded to his will through practiced channeling. Now it felt more dynamic, almost responsive in ways he hadn't experienced before. Is it dangerous? He asked finally. Uncertain, Hermione answered honestly. There are very few documented cases of core evolution following traumatic magical events. Each manifested differently. The healers believe your case is unique due to the hybrid magical technological nature of the feedback that caused it. The good news is you're not dying or losing your magic, Tony added with forced lightness. The concerning news is we don't know exactly what your new capabilities mean for future integration work. The Aegis, Harry remembered suddenly. The new armor, it was calibrated to my previous magical signature. Will it still function properly? That's what we need to determine, Hermione replied. But not until you're fully recovered. The healers insist on at least another week of observation before attempting any magical activity. Harry nodded, accepting the necessity despite his impatience. And the situation with Malfoy and Stain? Any leads on their location? S.H.I.E.L.D. and the International Confederation of Wizards are conducting joint operations for the first time in history, Tony informed him, a hint of satisfaction in his voice despite the circumstances. Your little near-death experience created unprecedented cooperation between magical and Muggle authorities. Nothing like a common enemy to forge unlikely alliances, Harry observed wryly. The attack on New York demonstrated that neither world can address these hybrid threats alone, Hermione elaborated. The Ministry initially tried to handle it as an internal magical security breach, but when the scale of technological integration became clear, they were forced to acknowledge the need for collaboration. Which means your vision is actually happening, Tony concluded, pride evident beneath his casual tone. Integration supervised by responsible authorities rather than weaponized by terrorists. Harry absorbed this information with cautious optimism. Years of advocating for thoughtful integration between magical and technological approaches had often felt like pushing against immovable institutional resistance. That something positive might emerge from the crisis offered a glimmer of hope amid the ongoing threats. What about the team? He asked. Any injuries during the operation? Everyone's fine, Tony assured him. Though Thor keeps insisting he could have contained the explosion with Mjolnir if you hadn't been so determined to handle it yourself. I think he's feeling competitively heroic. The Avengers have been reorganizing in response to these hybrid threats, Hermione added. Director Fury has established a specialized division focusing specifically on magical technological integration, with both S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and Wizarding representatives. And guess who's been appointed as co-director of this new division once he stops dramatically recovering in hospital beds? Tony smirked. Harry blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm only 17. Technically 18 in 3 months, Hermione pointed out. And there's no one more qualified to lead integration efforts. You literally embody the bridge between worlds. The responsibility implied by such a position felt simultaneously daunting and natural, a formal acknowledgement of the role Harry had been informally filling for years. Did I get a vote in this decision? He asked dryly. Nope, Tony replied cheerfully. But you can blame Fury and Dumbledore equally. They co-signed the recommendation to both governing bodies. Dumbledore? Harry repeated, surprised by the former headmaster's involvement in what was primarily a security operation. He's taken a more active role in international magical cooperation since the attack, Hermione explained. His influence was crucial in convincing traditional magical authorities to engage with S.H.I.E.L.D. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a healer, a middle-aged witch with the professional demeanor of someone accustomed to handling unusual magical medical situations. She performed a series of diagnostic spells, monitoring Harry's responses with practiced assessment. Your core stabilization is proceeding well, Mr. Potterstark, she reported after completing her examination. The harmonic variations are settling into consistent patterns, which indicate successful adaptation rather than deterioration. When can I resume normal activities? Harry asked directly. The healer's expression turned stern. Define normal activities. If you mean basic magic like levitation charms or simple transfiguration, perhaps in another 3 to 4 days. If you mean channeling massive amounts of power through experimental technological interfaces while fighting dark wizards and megalomaniacal inventors, not for at least a month. Tony failed to suppress a snort of amusement. I like her professional opinion. Your core needs time to fully stabilize in its new configuration, the healer continued, ignoring Tony's comment. Premature magical exertion could create unpredictable results or permanent damage. I've prescribed a graduated return to magical activity, beginning with simple wand work and progressing slowly to more complex spellcasting. And the armor integration? Harry pressed. That will require careful testing under controlled conditions, she replied firmly. Your core evolution has altered your magical signature significantly. Any technological interface designed for your previous pattern will require substantial recalibration. After the healer departed with strict instructions regarding Harry's recovery protocol, the three of them discussed implications and next steps. Despite the serious circumstances, there was an underlying current of optimism, a sense that their long-term vision of thoughtful integration was gaining legitimacy through crisis response. The Aegis will need complete reconfiguration, Tony mused, already mentally redesigning components. But with your enhanced core capacity, the potential capabilities exceed our original projections. Assuming the new signature can interface effectively with technology at all, Hermione cautioned. Core evolutions sometimes manifest in ways that alter fundamental magical properties. Only one way to find out, Harry replied, determination replacing uncertainty. We adapt, we innovate, and we prepare for whatever Malfoy and Stain are planning next. Which brings us to the concerning intelligence, Tony said, his expression growing more serious. S.H.I.E.L.D. analysis of the residual energy patterns from the destroyed container suggests the entity they created wasn't completely neutralized. The magical signature dispersed rather than dissipated, meaning components of it may still exist in some form. And if Malfoy and Stain recover even fragments, Harry began. They could potentially reconstruct it with the knowledge gained from the first attempt, Hermione finished. More efficiently and with refinements based on what they learned from the New York deployment. The gravity of the situation settled over them, the immediate threat had been contained, but the underlying danger remained. Malfoy and Stain, now operating with demonstrated capability and proven concept, would undoubtedly pursue their vision of weaponized integration with renewed determination. Then we need to be ready, Harry stated simply. My recovery, the Aegis recalibration, the new shield magical cooperation, all of it needs to proceed as quickly as safely possible. For once, I'm the one advocating patience, Tony remarked with ironic amusement. Take the time to heal properly, Harry. The team can handle monitoring and preparation while you recover. And I'll begin theoretical work on recalibrating the Aegis to accommodate your altered magical signature, Hermione added. By the time you're cleared for integration testing, we'll have preliminary designs ready. Harry nodded reluctantly, acknowledging the wisdom of their approach despite his instinct to rush back into action. The sensation of his evolved magical core, powerful but unfamiliar, reinforced the need for careful progression rather than reckless haste. As Tony and Hermione continued discussing technical aspects of the recalibration, Harry's thoughts turned to the broader implications of recent events. The crisis had forced unprecedented cooperation between worlds that had remained deliberately separated for centuries. His unique position bridging those worlds had never felt more significant or more challenging. Whatever came next, whether further attacks from Malfoy and Stain or new threats yet unimagined, the path forward was increasingly clear. Not magical or technological solutions in isolation, but thoughtful integration that respected the strengths and traditions of both approaches while forging something new and potentially transformative. The Arcane Avenger had emerged not just as a suit of armor or a superhero identity, but as a symbol of what that integration could achieve when guided by ethical purpose rather than weaponized for destruction. As Harry began his recovery, that symbol, and the responsibility it represented, had never felt more important. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.